Okay, meeting, please come to order. I'd like to welcome everybody to the, Land Management Committee meeting Wednesday, August 19th, 2020. Next meeting dates are September 2nd and 16th, October 7th and 21st, all in 2020. Next item is to approve the minutes of the last meeting. Is there a motion, please?
So moved.
Second. There's been a motion by Dr. Sand and a second by Mr. Aubart. All in favor of approving the minutes of the last meeting, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Mr. Chair, I'd like it duly noted that I was not in attendance at the last meeting.
Thank you, Jeff. You got that, Sherry? Thank you. Next item is a public hearing to consider and take action on a request for a conditional use permit for a large solar energy system. Public notice is hereby given to all persons in Pierce County, Wisconsin, that a public hearing will be held on the 19th day of August 2020 at 6 p.m. in the Ellsworth building in the Pierce County Fairgrounds in Ellsworth, Wisconsin, before the Land Management Committee to consider and take action on a request for a conditional use permit for a large solar energy system in the general, rural, and primary agriculture districts pursuant to Pierce County Code, Chapter 240-41D3 for Western Mustang Solar, LLC, agent for Barron's Revocable Trust Agreement, Norman Solberg, John and Sonia Lennertz, Marchand Farms, LLC, Philip and Judith Vergas, Nord Family Trust, Madison Special Trust, Mai Yang, James and Sandra Mason, Nicholas Danger and Sonia Thompson, Nils Ram, Rush River Solar, LLC, Bradley and Patricia Turner, Eric and Linda Turner, Mark and Pamela Spence, Russell and M. Spence Jr. and Spence Trust, owners on property located in part of sections 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, and 10. Town 27 North, Range 16 West, Town of Gilman. Okay, and would you guys like to introduce yourselves?
Yep, we would. Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for your consideration tonight. Emily Straka with Ranger Power, project developer of Western Mustang Solar.
Frank Fennessy with Ranger Power.
I asked maybe you pulled the mic a little bit closer. Maybe, I don't know if everybody else can hear. I can't very well.
Yeah. Check. Okay. So yeah, Emily Straka, project developer with Ranger Power on behalf of Western Mustang Solar. Address is 222 South Wisconsin Drive, Jefferson, Wisconsin, 53549. Also with us, we have Brian Karchowski, our technical expert from Stantec. We have Frank Fennessy, project representative, Jeff Rao, project representative, and Michael Logensgaard, general counsel, Godfrey Kahn.
Okay, thank you. Brad, would you like to get started on?
Okay. Due to the length of the staff report, I'll try to summarize it, but if anyone has questions.
Maybe pull the mic over too, please, Brad.
If anyone has questions, just
Okay,
jump in.
thank you.
The applicant is proposing to construct a 74 megawatt alternating current solar generating facility in the town of Gilman. The facility will have an east-west tracking solar panel system for off-site consumption. The power generated will be transmitted by a 34.5 kilovolt collection system to a substation to be developed as part of the project. A pad-mounted step-up transformer within the project substation will increase voltage to match a nearby 161 kilovolt transmission line, which will transmit power to another substation switching yard adjacent to the project, and will be developed, owned, and operated by Dairyland Power Cooperative. Additional facilities to be constructed include access roads to facilitate the erection and maintenance of the solar arrays and panels, temporary parking and an equipment laydown yard to be used during construction, and a fence surrounding the perimeter of the project. The properties are zoned general rural and primary agriculture. Surrounding land uses are primarily agriculture and residential. The project boundary is 1,055 acres, and the project footprint is approximately 480 acres. The proposed layout will occupy approximately 290 acres of prime farmland soils or soils of statewide importance. Participating landowners of the project had the ability to negotiate regarding which portions of their property would be used for the project. Staff met the applicant on various properties to determine stream navigability and the project's conformity with the Pierce County Shoreland Ordinance. As part of the application, Ranger Power also submitted numerous studies and other figures. They are listed here in the report. The major components of the project include solar modules, racking, tracking system, inverters, transformers, and a project substation. The project area includes approximately 20 panel array areas that are separately fenced with the panels comprising about 480 acres. There are many different module offerings to be evaluated, and a selection will be made based on the most cost-effective option. They are proposing setbacks of 35 feet from navigable water, from 890th Avenue, 42 feet from the right-of-way, or 75 feet from the center line. For 870th Avenue, 75 feet from the center line. County Road Highway BB is 67 feet from the right-of-way, 100 feet from the center line. Highway 29 is 77 feet from the right-of-way, 132 feet from the center line. And the substation will be 75 feet to any dwelling and 50 feet from any residential lot line. The applicant accepted the town of Gilman's recommendation of a minimum 150-foot setback to all above-ground project components from non-participating residences and at least 50 feet from property lines of non-participating residences, excluding fences and access roads, provided that non-participating landowners have the ability to waive the setbacks. Typical modules are approximately 78 inches by 39 inches and weigh approximately 50 pounds. Panels will be mounted on steel racking frame that is positioned 3 to 7 feet above grade with a plus or minus 60-degree range of motion driven by electric motors. The horizontal tracker would be in its highest position during the morning and evening hours when the trackers are tilted at their maximum angle and would be a maximum of 10 to 12 feet above grade and up to 4 feet above grade when tilted flat at midday. Panels will produce DC voltage which must be changed to AC voltage through inverters. There will be approximately 39 for the project. Construction equipment will include graders, bulldozers, excavators, forklifts, trailers, plows, trenchers, pile drivers, and directional boring rigs. It is anticipated that most of the equipment will initially deliver to the project temporary laydown areas. Equipment will be transported from the laydown yard to the appropriate construction site as needed. The site will receive an average of approximately 5 to 7 block trucks a day through the delivery period and 5 to 7 flatbed trucks a day during the pile driving period. Roads that consist of higher capacity will be used as much as possible. Construction activities are proposed to be conducted primarily during daylight hours during off-peak times Monday through Friday, not requiring additional site lighting. The laydown areas will be established throughout the project site, with main laydown areas being close to site entrances and secondary laydown as required in areas local to the performance of the construction work. Internal site roads will be 16 feet wide during construction and operation. Fencing will be used and will be deer exclusion fencing at a height of 7 feet. The project substation will require a 7 to 8 foot high chain link fence, which may include barbed wire at the top, which will be 10 feet. The applicant will hire contractors to safely operate and maintain the facility. and the facility will be remotely monitored 24/7. A glare and glint study was performed. It was determined that there would not be a negative impact to planes landing on runways facing the direction of the facility, or drivers of vehicles on the roads, or any home sites nearby. A sound study was also done. It determined that the background sound levels varied from 34 to 60 decibels for the varying locations and sample periods. Analysis of done for the project, the maximum sound impact to the nearest residence solar inverter was calculated to be 48 decibels, and a maximum sound impact for the transformer was calculated to be 32 decibels. And this falls within the Public Service Commission's guidelines. An electromagnetic frequency study was also completed. The study showed that there would be no impacts to residences nearby. A vegetation management plan was also submitted during development, and at the commencement of construction, site vegetation will be evaluated to determine which areas will be mowed, left undisturbed, or will require seeding. Portions of the site that are currently vegetated and not utilized for the project facilities or not impacted during construction will remain vegetated. Where grading occurs on site topsoil that is shallower than the graded area will be stripped, stockpiled, and properly attended by best management practices. Cut and fill areas shall be finished graded and seeded within 14 days of completion of the cut fill grading activities. Erosion control devices will be maintained throughout grading and stabilization according to required DNR permits. Prior to seeding, areas may be tilled to reduce compaction and better prepare seed bed. In lieu of deep tillage, specific species may be added to seed mixes that are capable of alleviating compaction. Deep tillage will not be conducted on non-farm wetlands. The project will utilize native species and permanent seed mixtures. Species will be chosen that are appropriate for the area and solar installations. A definitive decision has not been made as to the design of the planting at this time. No permanent wetland fill is proposed as part of the construction of the project. The project will require temporarily impacting wetlands due to the placement of both panel facilities and access roads, and existing contours will be maintained within the wetlands. Appropriate sediment barriers will be installed and maintained adjacent to wetlands and within workspaces as necessary to minimize the potential for sediment runoff pursuant to the stormwater management plan. Once permanent vegetation has been established, mowing or hand pulling may be used to manage areas where invasive or noxious weeds occur. Spot spraying should target only noxious and invasive weed species. The expected lifetime of the facility is approximately 30 to 40 years, with an opportunity for the project to expand to 50 years with equipment replacement. Depending on market conditions and project viability, solar arrays may be retrofitted and updated components to extend the life. Decommissioning activities will begin within 6 months of the project ceasing operation and are anticipated to be completed within 12 months. Access roads may be left in place if requested and or agreed to by the landowner. Pierce County zoning ordinance 240-41D3 regulates large solar energy systems, which are defined as equipment which directly converts and then transfers or stores solar energy into usable forms of thermal or electrical energy, which is intended for off-site consumption. The ordinance includes setbacks, which states any portion of the energy system shall not encroach within 10 feet of any property line or road right-of-way. It should be noted in developing the ordinance, staff recognized that large solar energy systems would require a conditional use permit, which would allow for the imposition of greater setbacks to be conditioned when assessing the site of a proposed project and its impact on the public health, safety, and character of the area. The ordinance addresses height, which states the solar energy system shall not exceed 35 feet. Solar energy system shall be positioned so that glare does not create unsafe conditions. All solar energy systems shall be installed by a North American Board of Certified Energy Practitioners, certified solar installer, or other person qualified to do such work. A solar energy system shall comply with all applicable state of Wisconsin electrical codes and national electric code. The structure, there should be structural integrity. Applicant submitted engineered plans which demonstrate structural integrity. And upon issuance of a conditional use permit, all large solar energy systems shall notify the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin. Pierce County Zoning Ordinance 24031, landscape buffers. The purpose of this are intended to reduce the potential adverse impacts that a particular land use might have on occupants of adjacent properties, such as glare of lights, dust, litter, and appearance. With vegetative screening, such as adverse impacts will be lessened. Landscape buffer requirements shall only apply to proposed uses in cases where commercial or industrial use abuts a residential or agricultural district, where utility use requiring a land use permit abuts any district, or such landscape buffer is required by a provision of the chapter. General requirements are landscape buffers shall be located in such a manner that a principal building or outdoor storage areas associated with the proposed use are screened as viewed from the vantage point of a principal structure's unaffected adjoining lots. Landscape buffers may only be located in an area devoted to meeting minimum side or rear yard requirements. Landscape buffers, when required, shall be established on a lot at the time of the lot's development or at the time of the lot is changed to a use which requires the buffer. Landscape buffer shall be provided on each lot as required by this section, independent of existing landscape buffer on adjoining lots. Installation and maintenance of the required landscape buffer shall be the responsibility of the owner of the lot. Existing woody plants which meet the requirements listed in subsection D may be used to meet the landscape buffer requirements. Landscape buffer tree requirements. Landscape buffers at the time of the establishment shall meet the design's specifications on file in the zoning office or approved and incorporated in this chapter. The land management minimum landscaping policy, which was adopted February 7, 2007, states screening. Vegetation, earthen berms, or fencing shall be placed between non-residential development and adjacent properties so as to render the development as visually unobtrusive as practical from adjacent properties or from public view. Native vegetation should be utilized whenever practical. Vegetative screening buffers shall be maintained in good condition. Power and orientation of light fixture. No exterior light fixture may be placed or oriented so that the lighting element or associated convex lens is visible from an adjacent lot line, ordinary high water mark, or public road right-of-way easement line. Pierce County Zoning Ordinance 240-41E3, utility facilities, states electrical substation shall be enclosed by a chain link fence at least 10 feet high. Such structure shall additionally be located at least 75 feet from a dwelling unit and 50 feet from any residential lot line. The Town of Gilman recommended approval of this request on March 11, 2020. Recommended conditions were included as attachments number 2. Concerns raised by the applicant included as attachment 1. The town noted a concern and suggested condition to review legal requirements. The Town of Gilman believes the following conditions are needed for the proposed project to be consistent with the objectives and goals of the town and to be in the public interest. The complete documents Documents attachment 1 and 2 were included with your packet, as well as a review document for the two. Staff has summarized the town recommendation and the applicant's response for this report. I'm going to summarize it even more. Again, if there's any questions. The town's recommendation addressed the planning phase, a pre-construction schedule, construction hours, the use of roads, road repair obligations, drainage infrastructure, revenue questions, school payment impacts, assurances in support of decommissioning, decommissioning requirements, power purchase agreement, insurance, setbacks, equipment height, vegetation and vegetation barriers, vegetative buffer, wildlife corridors and other related concerns, tree removal, testing soil and groundwater, additional environmental concerns, fencing, aesthetics, local emergency services coordination and public safety, good neighbor agreements, and informational area or kiosks for visitors to the area. Staff reviewed several additional studies relating to solar energy system, which were attached and included planning for utility scale solar energy facilities, planning advisory series, September/October 2019 from the American Planning Association, which we summarize it as establishing such a solar facility use may take an existing agricultural or forest operation out of production, and resuming such operations in the future will be a challenge. Land with significant topography, active agriculture land, or forest is more challenging to restore. For a solar facility, the site will need to be graded in places and revegetated to stabilize the soil. That vegetation typically needs to be managed over a long period of time. This prolonged vegetation management can change the natural characteristics of the soil, making restoration of the site for future agricultural use more difficult. While native plants, pollinator plants, and grazing options exist and are continually being explored, there are logistical issues with all of them, from soil quality impacts to the compatibility of animals with solar equipment. The impact of utility-scale solar facilities is typically negligible on neighboring property values. This can be a significant concern of adjacent residents, but negative impacts to property values are rarely demonstrated. Recommended setbacks are 150 feet from property lines and road rights-of-way, as well as a minimum 50-foot vegetative buffer shall be maintained. If there is no existing vegetation, or if the existing vegetation is inadequate to serve as a buffer, a triple row of trees and shrubs will be planted on approximately 10-foot centers in the 25 feet immediately adjacent to the security fence. New plantings of trees and shrubs shall be approximately 6 feet in height at the time of planting. In addition, pine seedlings will be installed in the remaining 25 feet of the 50-foot buffer. Ancillary project facilities may be included in the buffer. The document also went on to list minimum development standards, which are included A through M. Staff also reviewed the study of acoustics and EMF levels for solar photovoltaic projects prepared for Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, prepared by Peter H. Goldberg, INC, CCM, Tech Environmental, Inc. It was summarized as any sound from the PV array and equipment was inaudible at setback distances of 50 to 150 feet from the boundary. Inverters generate more sound. At 150 feet from the inverter pad, sound levels approach background levels. At the utility scale sites, electric field levels along the fence PV array boundary and inverters at the location setback 50 to 150 feet from the boundary were not elevated above background levels. Magnetic field levels at locations of 50 to 100 feet from the fenced array boundary were not elevated above background levels. There are significant magnetic fields at locations a few feet from these utility scale inverters. At a distance of 150 feet from the inverters, these fields drop back to very low levels and in many cases to background levels. Another study was an exploration of property value impacts near utility scale solar installations. Policy research project, LBJ School of Public Affairs, University of Texas at Austin, May 2018. The results of the survey of residential home assessors show that the majority of respondents believe that proximity to a solar installation has either no impact or a positive impact on home values. However, variation in responses by size of the facility, distance from the home, and the assessor's experience assessing near such an installation previously all impacted those estimates. Regression analysis suggests that closer proximity to an installation is associated with more negative estimates of property value impacts, as is larger installation size. Prior experience assessing near a solar installation, by contrast, was associated with more conservative estimates of impact. Meanwhile, the median and mode of all estimates of impact was 0, suggesting negative estimates from a few respondents were pulling down the mean. Additionally, the survey results indicate that respondents believe some features of solar installations may be associated with positive impacts. These include a location on land that was previously had an unappealing use, or the presence of trees or other visual barriers around the array. Meanwhile, features such as being located on land that previously had an appealing use in higher installations are expected to have a negative impact according to the respondents. Recommendation. The Land Management Committee will need to make a determination as to whether the proposed use at the proposed location would be contrary to the public interest and whether it would be detrimental or injurious to the public health, public safety, or character of the surrounding area. Additionally, Wisconsin Stats 66.0401(1M), Authority to Restrict Systems Limited, states, no political subdivision may place any restriction, either directly or in effect, on the installation or use of a solar energy system unless the restriction satisfies one of the following conditions. A, serves to preserve or protect the public health or safety. B, does not significantly increase the cost of the system or significantly decrease its efficiency. C, allows for an alternative system of comparable costs and efficiency. 4, local procedure. B, a political subdivision may make a record of its decision-making on an application for approval, including a recording of any public hearing, copies of documents submitted at any public hearing, and copies of any other documents provided to the political subdivision in connection with the application for approval. D, a political subdivision shall base its decision on an application for approval on written findings of fact that are supported by evidence in the record. Staff recognizes that the applicant has agreed to many of the town of Gilman's recommended conditions. Not all of these recommended conditions, agreed to and not agreed to by the applicant, can be part of this conditional use permit. Staff is hopeful that the applicant will honor the commitments made to the town, even if this conditional use permit does not require them. Staff recommends that the Land Management Committee determine whether the proposed use at the proposed location would be contrary to the public interest and whether it would be detrimental or injurious to public health, public safety, or character of the surrounding area. If found to not be contrary to the above, staff recommends the Land Management Committee approve this conditional use permit for a large solar energy system with the following conditions. Number 1, the owner or operator shall construct, maintain, and operate the facility in compliance with the submitted plan and or as described in the response to the town recommendations, unless modified by a condition of this permit. Number 2, the inverter shall be set back a minimum of 300 feet from any non-participating landowner's lot line. Number 3, a minimum 50-foot vegetative buffer consisting of existing trees and vegetation shall be maintained between the facility and adjacent non-participating properties and road rights-of-way. If existing vegetation is inadequate to serve as a buffer, new plantings of trees, shrubs, grasses shall be established. The majority of the vegetative buffer shall have a minimum height of the project exterior fence. Initial planting shall render the facility visually unobtrusive from adjacent properties and public view. Vegetative buffer may be waived/modified with the consent of the adjacent property owner. Notice of consent shall be submitted to the zoning office. Number 4, the project shall be set back a minimum of 150 feet to all above-ground project components from non-participating residences and at least 100 feet from property lines of non-participating properties, excluding fences and access roads, and 67 feet from all road rights-of-way. Property line setback may be waived/modified with consent of adjacent property owners, no less than 10 feet. Notice of consent shall be submitted to the zoning office. The applicant shall enter into road agreements with the Pierce County Highway Department if deemed necessary by the Highway Commissioner, as well as with the town of Gilman. A vegetative management plan shall be developed for the site, and it shall be reviewed for approval by the Land Management Committee. If the applicant shall work with the Land Conservation Department in developing the plan. The plan shall include trees, shrubs, seed mixes, vegetation maintenance, and weed controls for the vegetative buffer, facility construction, as well as facility operations. Construction main laydown areas shall be located at least 1,320 feet from any non-participating residence. Secondary laydown areas shall be at least 500 feet from non-participating residences. Number 8, construction hours shall be daylight hours, not earlier than 7 a.m. and not later than 7 p.m. Monday through Saturday. Number 9, the applicant shall submit a construction management plan which includes delivery routes, parking areas, laydown areas, noise mitigation, and dust suppression methods prior to any site disturbance. Number 10, a final grading plan shall be submitted to the zoning office prior to any site disturbance. Number 11, a post-construction sound analysis shall be conducted as described in the application. Number 12, the applicant shall submit a decommissioning plan to the county for approval. The purpose of the decommissioning plan is to specify the procedure by which the applicant or its successor would remove the solar facility after the end of its useful life. Number 13, the decommissioning plan shall include a decommissioning cost estimate prepared by a state licensed professional engineer. The cost estimate shall provide a gross estimated cost to decommission the solar facility in accordance with the decommissioning plan and these conditions. The decommissioning cost shall not include any estimates or offsets for the resale or salvage value of the solar facility equipment and materials. Number 14, the applicant shall provide decommissioning security in one of two following forms to the Pierce County Corporation Council for approval. First one, letter of credit or other acceptable assurance for the full decommissioning cost. Second option is a tiered security such as 10% of the decommissioning cost to be deposited in a cash escrow reasonably acceptable to the county, and 10% of the decommissioning cost estimate in the form of letter of credit or by other acceptable insurance, with the amount of financial assurance increasing by an additional 10% in years 2 through 9 after commencement of the operation of the facility. In the 10th year after operation, the applicant will have increased the value of the financial assurance to 100% of the decommissioning cost estimate. At such time, the applicant may be entitled to a return of 10% cash escrow. Number 15, the maximum height of the project's equipment shall be 15 feet with the exception of the project substation. 16, panels shall have a resting angle of 60 degrees. 17, the owner/operator should install deer fencing around the solar equipment at a height of 7 feet unless electrical code mandates a different height. No fence shall cross a navigable waterway. Number 18, all lighting shall comply with Land Management Department minimum landscaping policy. 19, no structure shall be placed or land disturbed in the floodplain. 20, a copy of the signed interconnection agreement shall be submitted to the zoning office. 21, any unforeseen erosion issues shall be addressed to the satisfaction of the county. 22, applicants shall coordinate with emergency services staff to provide materials, education, and/or training to the department serving the property within emergency services. 23, if drainage infrastructure or systems of non-participating properties are damaged by any cause connected with the project, Western Mustang Solar LLC shall restore the drainage infrastructure or system to a condition at least as good as the pre-construction condition. 24, the applicant shall at all times during construction and operation of the project maintain a broad general liability insurance policy commensurate with the industry standards. Certificates of insurance shall be provided to the county and town of Gilman upon request. 25, the post-construction sound analysis results shall be submitted to the zoning office. 26, substation shall be enclosed by a chain link fence at least 10 feet high. The Land Management Committee should also consider conditions, shall also consider the following conditions which were recommended by the town of Gilman. First, the applicant shall buy the described monocrystalline modules from a manufacturer with a combined score of 85 or higher on the Silicon Valley Toxics Coalition Solar Scorecard. Second, the applicant shall provide financial assurance for the construction of the project in the amount of $150,000 to Pierce County and the town of Gilman. Third, the applicant shall keep and provide a list of all the chemicals for the maintenance, including quantity and frequency of application of each. Applicant shall monitor soil, wells, drinking water supplies for any and all chemical residue annually. And lastly, the applicant shall provide Pierce County and the town of Gilman relevant site plans, including erosion control plan, construction timelines, and other relevant construction information at least 75 days prior to the start of construction to allow the local governments an opportunity to review and comment on the construction information. The construction team should meet with county staff and town representatives at a mutually agreeable date not less than 45 days prior to the start of construction.
Thank you very much, Brad. Before we get into the public comment section here, I'd like to ask Ranger if they'd like to give a presentation on things here. That might answer some questions and stuff as we go forward too, so. Thank you.
A project representative of Western Mustang. So just to provide kind of a brief introduction to Ranger, we're a team of experienced developers. We specialize in utility scale solar development. We have a project portfolio of over 40 projects throughout the Midwest, which is over 5,000 megawatts, all in development. And 3 in Wisconsin right now. One was approved by the Public Service Commission earlier this year in Jefferson County. And sorry, just to hold for a second, we just kind of want to note for the record that we did submit our responses to the staff for the conditions. Just note that for the record, and then also the property value impact study as well. So I think we kind of provided an overview on the project, so I'll keep this really brief. But Western Mustang is a 74 megawatt AC project. Project boundary is 1,055 acres. The project footprint is 479 acres, which is about 45% of the project boundary.
Could you hold on a second, Kelly? Can we turn up her mic a little
Sure.
bit? Is there
Sorry,
a way
I
to
can
do
also
that?
move it. I can move it closer as well. The mask is a little.
It might be just some of the echo in here too. I get a lot of just background. Let's try that.
Yeah, is that better? Okay, great. So in the location of the project, Pierce County, Gilman Township, and the project is bordered by 890th to the north, 330th to the east, Highway 29 to the south, and 450th to the west. And just to provide kind of another overview of how we site our facilities for this committee, there's basically 4 things that we look for when we're looking to site our projects. The first is the electrical infrastructure of the area, looking for robust enough interconnection to accommodate a project of the size that we're speaking to. The second is close to large load centers such as Minneapolis, which kind of is connected to the third one, which interest from utilities in purchasing the power from this project or the project itself, which, is related to the load centers because that's where the people are. And, as I think probably this committee knows, there's a lot of older Wisconsin utilities that are looking to come offline soon, expensive to keep maintaining the facilities. And, finally, we do look for communities that are looking for these types of projects. And so, the Pierce County Comprehensive Plan does support the responsible development of large energy solar systems, and did play a decision in our choice to invest in this area. So, and finally, our participating landowners also plays a large role. We're looking for folks that do want to participate in these projects, that want to work with us, and that we want to work with as well. But obviously not all landowners are neighbors to the project, and are not participating in the project. And so we have been working with non-participating landowners since February of 2019 to share information about the project. We've also made contact or attempted to make contact with all of the neighbors to the project. It's part of our development strategy, community first. We really want to get down on the ground and understand people's concerns, and part of that was holding an open house in 2019. We had over 70 attendees. Additionally, we've spent a lot of time with the town of Gilman, have attended 9 meetings from May of 2019 to March of 2020, as well as 4 Gilman Township Plan Commission meetings from December of 2019 to March of 2020. So it's really important to us to kind of take feedback from neighbors and from the community and incorporate it into our design. We'll continue those outreach efforts as well. And finally, just want to talk a little bit about project benefits. First and foremost, this conditional use, the proposed conditional use, we think is consistent with the Gilman Township Comprehensive Plan, does meet or exceed the Pierce County ordinance requirements. So, in excess of $74 million investment into the community, and will generate significant tax revenue and benefits through the state's utility shared revenue program that provides unrestricted funds available for local government to decide how they'd like to use it. It is expected for Pierce County in excess of $170,000 annually, as well as $120,000 annually for Gilman Township. We do recognize that this land is being taken off of local property tax roll, and so we have committed to make up the funds that are provided to the schools from the project. So we have committed to replace those lost revenues to Spring Valley Public Schools and Chippewa Technical College. Finally, construction activity is expected to stimulate the local economy. Our preference and our priority is to hire locally, and we are expecting construction workers to stay in the area and to spend their money in the area and boost the local economy. And I guess, finally, we do expect this project to preserve and protect the rural characteristic of the community for many years to come, and to be restored to agricultural at the end of the day. It's expected to improve air quality, to decrease reliance on fossil fuels, and soil quality, to let the land rest as well. And the last kind of just 2 things I'll say is that provides income diversification for landowners and generational farmers, and balances individual property rights with community benefits as well. So I think we would like to just address the staff recommendations that we have objections to at this point. And I think as we've discussed, we've really developed this project with the local community in mind, and have incorporated feedback into this application. And so in order to preserve our legal rights, we submitted a letter objecting to several of the conditions recommended in the staff report, and we want to just explain the reasons behind these objections, and emphasize that we're committed to continuing to work with the county and the town, and we really took the effort to accept the ones that we can and the ones that we could not, to, not change them as much as possible. So our goal is to understand, the concerns and the objectives of the county, and we usually are able to address these concerns and build a project that's economically feasible for us and that achieves the goals of the community as well. So with that, we'll just get into it. Does this sound okay? Okay.
I think so.
Okay.
So. Can everybody out there make out what everything's being said?
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay.
Okay, so, with that in mind, the first condition that we just wanted to discuss was number 2. The inverters shall be set back a minimum of 300 feet from non-participating landowners' lot line. So, I guess our concern is that this setback is excessive. The third-party study that the staff provided from the county and that our internal sound report says it indicates that the sounds from the inverters diminish to background sound at 150 feet. And that is kind of our experience in the real world as well. So, it does take away, the 300-foot setback does take away a lot of flexibility from the project, which reduces the project efficiency and at the end of the day really can impact, the design, which can impact how we market the project. So that's kind of the reasoning behind that. And I guess the rationale is kind of unclear to us, and we're just trying to understand what the Land Management Committee is trying to accomplish and what the concern is, because we think if it's sound that we have addressed this. And additionally, we've committed to a post-construction sound analysis that would further address any issues related to sound. So that's number 2. The next is condition number 3, so the 50-foot vegetative buffer. So we don't think that this is an appropriate condition for the type of facility that we're proposing today. The facility we're proposing is not a quarry or a mine. It's not really comparable to industrial land use, we think. The project is a much more mild use of the land. We did bring some visuals that kind of help show that, but we really do kind of design these facilities to be as low-lying and as least intrusive as possible. And some of the things that go into that are the vegetation that's permanently planted underneath all of the panels. There's the deer fence that provides kind of an easier transition, as well as the space inside of the facility. There's anywhere from 18 to 22 feet between each rows of panels. So that's kind of our thought behind this. And we understand that the section 240-31 of the zoning ordinance allows for but does not require the landscape buffer to address concerns such as light, dust, litter, and appearance. And really, we think appearance is the only one that could apply here. However, what we're proposing to do is to provide vegetative buffers to non-participating neighbors that don't have existing vegetation, in a way that's reasonably dense and reasonably at a reasonable height as well. So that's kind of what we were thinking here. And additionally, we won't own the part of the facility where the vegetative buffer is called for in the condition. So we think that it does kind of infringe on the landowner, because some of them have only put in a certain amount of land into the project, and then we'll continue to farm the rest. So we think that could also infringe on their ability to continue to farm the rest of their property. So another point here is the height. Well, so a setback is required from the panels that's 2 to 3 times the height of the vegetation. So if we have the vegetative buffer closer to the facility, then we'll have an additional setback. And we think that we've already exceeded the local setbacks as laid out in the ordinance, and that the current setbacks are pretty extensive. But again, we do understand the county's concern, and we want to work with you guys on this, and want to figure out a way to make everyone happy. And we think that our proposal to provide this buffer for non-participating landowners who don't have existing vegetation and have a view of the project is what we're thinking. So. So for number 4, so the project shall be set back a minimum of 150 feet to all above ground components and at least 100 feet from property lines. I'm gonna just stop there. So, I think our concern is the increase from 50 feet to 100 feet from property lines. And, I think we worked really closely with the town of Gilman and, significantly increased the setbacks, which again, kind of reduced the efficiency of the project, which at the end of the day does impact our ability to market the project. So that's where our concern is. And, I guess we didn't really see any justification for the increase of setbacks. So we'd like to kind of understand from the county what the reasoning was behind that. And, again, we calculated it out that this increased setback would result in a loss of 12 megawatts, which is about 16% of the total project capacity. And part of why, we're able to market these solar facilities at a competitive cost is really because of the economies of scale. And so when we lose that, it does kind of impact our ability to do that. So. Okay, so number 6, the vegetative management plan and the vegetative buffer. So we have already provided the town and the county with a vegetative management plan, and we'll absolutely work with the Land Management Committee and the Land Conservation Department to refine this plan. We think the rest of the condition we kind of addressed in condition number 4, but just please note again that we are proposing this vegetative buffer for non-participating landowners with minimal existing vegetation for number 6. So if there's something in the vegetation management plan that the county specifically wants to see, we're happy to address that, but we did already provide that. So that's number 6. Okay. So number 7, the construction main laydown areas located 1,320 feet from non-participating residents. So we did take a look at this and really tried to see if we could make this work. Unfortunately, what we found is that there were only 3 parcels that we could use as main laydown areas with this setback requirement. And kind of notably, one of them, or the closest, I should say, of the laydown area to the nearest road is 1,400 feet. And so, part of our concern, aside from the laydown areas, there are only 3 locations for the laydown areas that, they're not workable. And we also think there may be an unintended consequence of increased traffic and impact to roads, just because, the laydown areas typically are going to be moving throughout the project area as construction progresses. And so, we think that the traffic actually may be negatively impacted if the construction crews are going from a parcel to the same laydown area continuously, when normally it would be shifting with the construction. And, we think that the moving laydown yard, and it is industry standard, is the most efficient way to keep the construction duration as short as possible, and have the least impacts to local roads and traffic. So, and really the main purpose of laydown yards is to store materials. We're not planning on having a constant stream of massive equipment. I mean, it's really going to be, a pile driver and pickup trucks and maybe a trencher. And the only oversized vehicle really that will be coming through is carrying the main project transformer. So just something to kind of keep in mind. So, yeah. Okay, so number 13 is the next one, decommissioning plan. So decommissioning plan shall include a decommissioning cost estimate prepared by a state licensed professional engineer. It should be the gross estimated cost. Should not include any estimates or offsets for the resale or salvage value. So we will provide the county with a cost estimate in an updated decommissioning plan. We do think that the cost estimate should include resale and salvage costs. It really is a large cost that does offset quite a bit, and whoever does decommission the facility will utilize that cost. So we think it's appropriate to include that in the decommissioning cost. It's a lot of glass, a lot of steel, and it does lose some value over time, but it's a substantial cost. So we do think it should be considered. Okay, so number 14, decommissioning security. So I think kind of the first point we'd like to make here is really just, how extremely unlikely it is that the project will be decommissioned in the first 15 or 20 years. I think that it's a combination of reasons why, but the first is really that, in order to build this project, we're gonna need to have, a long-term arrangement with a utility. And so, which we're contractually obligated to be producing power, and we're going to need to rejuvenate that revenue. So the project will be operating, so that provides security. And additionally, the project is going to need to borrow millions of dollars to start construction, and lenders will have collateral interest. And so if the owner walks away, then the lenders will step into their shoes and will have the same interest and look to also rejuvenate that revenue. So, and finally, the project is required to have substantial insurance. So another reason why it's just very unlikely that the project would need to be decommissioned in the first 15, 20 years. But regardless, we did hear the concern of the town, and we're absolutely willing to post a bond. We're definitely not saying we're not going to post security. We have proposed 2 different alternative ways to post the security. So in the decommissioning plan, we agreed to post a bond for the full net cost in year 15. And the town of Gilman said that they would like it earlier. So we did agree to post $500,000 bond before construction that would double in year 15. Sorry, my mask is slipping. I'll move it up a bit. And so, we think that these first 2 options are reasonable and, do take into account the unlikelihood of a decommissioning in years first 15 or 20 years. And we weren't exactly clear on what was being proposed in this condition. Let's see, let's pull it up here. So for letter A, we weren't clear on when we would post the bond and if it includes the scrap and salvage value and what it is. Yeah, sorry, that's all. And then for letter B, we weren't sure how numbers 1 and 2 work together. If there's 10% in a cash escrow and an additional 10% as a letter of credit, and then how kind of the third line item works with the first 2. So we're just not exactly following the intent there. So maybe a little clarity, but we're absolutely willing to work on this, and we're committed to posting a bond, and just want to make sure we're doing it in an appropriate way. So. So number 21. So we're not really objecting to number 21, which is the erosion. Any unforeseen erosion issues shall be addressed to the satisfaction of the county. We think the condition's overly vague, and we think it should be tied to a county or state requirement or standard, which we expect to meet or exceed anyway. And we are going to be planting, vegetation throughout the entire project area, which will, increase infiltration and prevent runoff as well. So that was the thought there. And we'll have a plan and, revise that towards once we, approach our final design as well. So, yeah, we're open to that, but we'd like it to be tied to a standard of some sort. Number 27, the panel manufacturer. So number 27 through 30 are the the town of Gilman's recommendations. I'm just calling them 27 through 30. So 27, the panel manufacturer with a combined score of 85 or higher. So this rating is, really kind of about the manufacturing process of the panels that won't really take place in the town of Gilman or in Pierce County. And so we don't necessarily think it's appropriate to include in the conditional use permit. However, we are willing to commit to using a tier 1 panel. We understand that the quality of the materials is important to the town and the county, so we want to address that concern. So number 28, or the second bullet, financial assurance for construction of the project in the amount of $150,000. Again, I think we're more than willing to work on decommissioning and assurances. We just weren't clear on kind of what the justification was for this assurance, if it, what it's in support of, and that we think that the $500,000 bond is sufficient. So just kind of wanted to understand a little bit more behind that, see if we can clear that up. Number 29, the chemicals, list of chemicals used for maintenance and monitors for soil, well, and drinking water. So, we're objecting to this because, we think that this issue has been studied in great depth, and, that there's no contamination from the type of PV modules that we're proposing on the project. I mean, the panels are made of glass and silicone, and, these really are elements that are abundant in Earth's crust, and they do not pose harm to human health, public health, groundwater, and they're completely safe. So, and I think specifically our concern is that if there's testing and some result comes back and it's not related to our project, then that could cause major issues, especially as we're looking at financing and trying to assess risk. So that's number 29. Number 30, number 30 is not on this list. So those are the conditions that we would just appreciate further discussion on, and I think we in general appreciate your guys' time and consideration and attention for me walking through these, we have just been working in this community for a long time and appreciate everyone's cooperation, and we really did make every effort to accept as many of these conditions as we could, and push back as little as possible on the ones that we needed to. And there were some that we legally objected to but accepted, even though we didn't necessarily need to. And at the end of the day, we want to work with the county on all of these and come to an agreement. So thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else anybody else wants to add here? We're all good? Okay, thank you. I now declare this meeting open to public comment. John Ruckavina, there we go. Had to be your spelling, not my reading. Thank you.
So, is this my line?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yep, there you go.
So I am a landowner adjacent to the solar array. I moved here about 3 years ago, and the main reason was I lived in downtown Minneapolis. The reason I moved was to enjoy the beauty of nature and to get out of the metal and concrete and glass world was my prime objective. So again, I achieved that finding a place on 890th Avenue. So about 2 years ago, I was approached by Mustang Solar with the idea that they wanted to put up a solar array, and I was always against it from day one. They also asked me to put an egress into the power station on 890th, and I rejected that idea as well. So I guess basically I've always been against having a solar array near a property that I just wanted a nice view and peace and quiet. So, but my biggest concern is property value. So when I searched out the property, I paid a certain dollar figure per acre for a house and a shed. I reject the University of Texas at Austin property value assessment because they're in a desert. We are not desert here in Wisconsin. We have trees, vegetation, so I think it's appropriate to have solar arrays in desert locations, and there's some really beautiful ones near Las Vegas, Nevada, but I don't think they belong where we live. There's 3 properties for sale currently on 890th Avenue. One of them sold in 4 days, but his first question was, is there any view of the solar array site? And the answer was no, so that one sold in 4 days, okay? There's another one for sale that has view of the solar array proposal, and that one has not sold in 4 months. So I can give you this data and talk to the people who have this information. There's one owner who bought his property before the February 2019, and he is angry that he was not aware of, but again, this project didn't start, but he's angry about having the view of the solar array. So it's mostly about glare, it's mostly about aesthetics. I know it follows guidelines, but it's not the reason I moved to St. Croix Valley, or St. Croix County. I have honeybees, so I'm concerned about the adjacent land having enough flora and fauna to survive. Honeybees already have an issue. So those are my main concerns, reduction of my property value. If I wanted to sell, what could I sell? How much would I lose if I wanted to sell my property now that there's a solar array looking out my back window every day? So those are my comments, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, John. John Schaefer, please. Welcome, John. Not everybody's name tonight is going to be John, so.
Okay. Well, I appreciate being able to speak tonight. I also used to be a county board supervisor 20 years ago, so I know what is involved with the legislative process. And the biggest thing is I want to make sure everybody is heard in this whole process. And my concern is we don't know all the information. I do, even though I am for alternative energy systems, solar power, windmills, hydro, and many others. I have a science degree. Dr. Sandin was my professor at one time, for the record, when I was in my late teens, early 20s. I'm in my early 40s now. And the biggest thing I want to make sure is that we have good setbacks, safety measures, addressing health and environmental impacts. In the past 20 years in Gilman Township, we have had a significant amount of growth, mostly on the northern part of Gilman Township. My concern is the solar farm is proposed in that area. And I'm not against solar farms. I think we need to have some sort of alternative energy systems. However, it needs to be planned out properly. The fact that there's been a lot of objections from the company makes me feel that we need to iron out things before any potential farm's going to go in. I know that back 18 years ago, the Land Management Committee did rush through a rezone without doing any sort of land use survey because most of the town board members at the time were more concerned about selling land for housing and other non-agricultural uses instead of looking long-term for the health and safety of the residents. And just to let you know, it was not even 2 years after the rezone because of poorly planned poor planning by the Gilman Town Board and the Land Management Department. We had a lot of grief and conflicts that were very much avoidable. I don't want anything to be short-sighted, and we have to think long-term. Granted, I am a science person, and we have engineers, we have physicists. Try to figure out how to make things work to protect both those who are for the farm and those who have to live around it. I really, really think that there's great people on both sides. I know people on both sides because I am a century farmer. I've lived in this township my whole life. My family has farmed in this area for over 100 years. I don't like seeing people feeling divided, and I feel we have to do more to try to minimize the potential problems, the potential conflicts, and hopefully come to a reasonable solution. I did take an alternative energy course in the ag engineering class. However, he did mention that much of the solar panels were made out of renewable material. If such a facility is going to go up, I want to make sure that material can be reused and recycled and not end up in landfills or decay or deteriorate. And if they do end up in the landfills, are they going to be in the local landfills that we have already, or are they going to go to a special one? That's something that needs to be addressed. I am concerned about fires. I have DNR wildfire suppression training. How are we going to make sure that they're not going to be a hazard to our firefighters who risk their lives protecting the community? I want to make sure Ranger Power is going to have a good course on dealing with wildfires, not getting firefighters electrocuted or having to deal with toxic fumes. So I do want to make sure everything is done in a safe manner. My cousin was fire chief in Spring Valley, and other fire chiefs have said the thing that always made them upset was companies that were not willing to be open with them on how to fight fires with new technology that has come up. And I'm not anti-technology and I'm not anti-solar farms, but I want safety measures. I want to make sure that we are thinking long-term and know about any potential risk and be open to the idea that there could be other risks that have not been seen. And this hits hard for me because I have two children. I have a son and daughter, and one of them is autistic. And we don't know if anything with electrical pollution has had an effect with that. We're still learning, and a good scientist, a good physicist, engineer is always going to be looking on how to make things better, how to make things safer, and most of all, how to make things cheaper and realistic. I just don't like seeing the easy way being taken out, and that's gone on way too long, especially in this land management department and politics in general. Now, we also had electrical pollution when we had poor planning go in my area, and for 7 years we dealt with straight voltage electrical pollution, and it was mainly because of poor planning and not the proper infrastructure. Once the proper infrastructure came in, the electrical pollution did subside, but it took 7 years and it affected the health of our cattle and livestock, and I don't expect people to be guinea pigs like my cattle were. During COVID-19, we haven't had enough meetings because of social distancing. I feel we need at least another 3 to 6 months of study to hopefully lead to better solutions that can benefit all involved, both those for and against, and hopefully can come up with new and additional technology for solar farms so we can minimize the impact, hopefully protect the pollinators like the bees. I like getting fresh honey whenever I can. And hopefully maybe create freshwater solar panels that can have more environmental benefits and create more green collar jobs to hopefully offset the tax revenue that's being lost by the proposed solar farm. And does Pierce County even have alternative energy and siting ordinance? If they do, when was it last updated? And if not, why? Maybe many of the issues that we are dealing with now could be addressed a lot easier. I asked for setbacks, buffers, health and safety protocols, and monitoring that can be reviewed by the public. Just as my local electrical co-op that helped our dairy farm, now we're beef and replacement cattle, how to use less electricity, the same should be done with this company. I believe solar farms need to be regulated, hopefully with a separate committee that's separate from the township and county so that we do not have any potential conflicts of interest. My goal is to see, with good planning, we can make things work properly. However, if it gets rushed through, I could see more problems down the road that could have been avoided with well thought out planning. I do not want to see what happened in my township when we end up having an animal shelter get opened up because our change in zoning was done haphazardly back in 2002. I believe good planning takes time, but it will be worth it. And with that, I hope we can figure out something that's good for the community, but for right now, I think we should wait on the solar panels until we have issues ironed out. Thank you.
Thank you, John. James Reed. Welcome, James.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm James Reed, as you said there. I represent the Reed Family Trust property. I primarily here to express a couple of concerns. One is the land values, as the gentleman said here before. If you look on your map there, my property, or our property is, my son and his family lives on this property, but we're bordered on both east and west side by these panels. And I cannot see how that's not going to affect the land values of that property. I'm also concerned about the environmental issues, the sound, the frequencies. I know we've got a station here that says we're going to be monitoring it. I guess I'm going to ask who's going to be monitored, who they're going to report to, and who's going to maintain records of that so that the residents and public can see those. And that's the same story with us, really. I know that in the past, serving on planning commissions and so forth in my career, it's well worth it and so forth. But these things are supposed to have a lifespan of, say, 15 to 20 years and possibly farther with updates and et cetera, so forth. But again, here is Pierce County going to be able to monitor those, keep records of them, and possibly even have the town of Gillum to be able to receive those so the residents and public of that area can review these from time to time. And if they do have any issues, who do they report to? Again, here, with those issues of it, I'm not sure where the answers to those would be for questions, but it appears to me that there are a few people on this sheet of paper here that's getting the panels and so forth. They're going to benefit financially for it. The rest of the people surrounding it is going to be to their detriment. Thank you.
Thank you. Kenneth Cosgrove. Okay. Yep. That's just fine. You would have been next anyway, so. You would have been next anyway, so.
My name is Alicia Akin, and I live on 850th Avenue. I'm a certified,
Could you step right up to the mic? Sorry
I know
about that. You can pull it down there, I'm sure, a little bit too, please.
I always
Thank
have to
you.
do that. All right. I'm a certified land use planner. That means I have a master's degree in planning, and I've been a planner for more than 15 years. I took an 8-hour test on the fundamentals of land use planning, ethics, and law, and passed. In fact, the day that I took the test, or the year that I took the test, I had the highest score in Minnesota on the ethics portion. I'm required to do 32 hours of continuing education to maintain my certification. So when I heard that there was going to be a solar utility plant in my backyard, I did some research and participated in programs for planners on the siting of solar projects. In fact, the APA paper that was shared, I gave it to the office. Here's what I expected, from my research, here's what I expected the project to look like. Set back away from homes and residences. Well thought out wildlife corridors, safety measures for fire, and good faith contributions to the community by the developer. I found none of that in this proposal by this company. I have some pictures. I know in COVID, you don't want to grab them from my hands. This is, I've got a map showing my actual parcel and a photo enhanced picture of what my backyard will look like. So this is community first as defined by Ranger Power. You'll see that in the picture, that is what a 50-foot setback would look like. It'll be about maybe 80 feet from my house. Those are my son's actual pigs that he was walking in that actual spot of my yard. And all I did was cut out the wire fence that we have and put in where the solar panel would go in. That's what they've proposed, and that's what it will look like for many of us without a buffer, the buffers that they're against. You can see that my parcel, so I'm Alicia Cosgrove on that map. My parcel's pretty well surrounded by the project on 3 sides. The only side that I'm not surrounded by the project on is my son's parcel. We'll get to that in a little bit. I was offered a good neighbor agreement, but it read more like a bribe than any good neighbor agreement I've ever seen as a professional. I recently asked Ranger Power if I could, as the trustee of my son's land, also receive a good neighbor agreement. But to do that as his trustee, I would have to have Judge Bowles see it. And I have not gotten any communication from them on that or an okay for that. The town of Gilman's CUP process was confusing at best. In the 15 years I worked for the state of Wisconsin, I've never seen anything like it. The Plan Commission chair kept repeating, there's nothing we can do about this, while Ranger handed out good neighbor bribes and telling people that it was inevitable. I've asked the town chairman repeatedly, but to this day, he has not and will not tell me who the actual members of the Plan Commission are. No one seems to know who exactly is on this body that okayed the process and the plan. And I have those in email, in writing, so this isn't like a he says, she says. I have 3 different emails where I ask, who is on our Plan Commission? But enough of me as a planner. As a planner, I realize I might not know everything about everything. My son sees a pediatric epidemiologist in the Twin Cities. There are only 30 people in the United States with this level of training. He's a doctor, a pediatrician, a neurologist, and he specializes in epilepsy. He's really smart. So, I've read a lot of the planning material that renewables are good, solar is good, but I thought I'd ask him, what about a solar utility being built just feet from my lot line and house? His first question was, and I expected him to say, oh, don't worry about it. But his first question was, why? Don't you live in Wisconsin? Isn't there enough land for them to back off from houses? He's really smart, because of course there is. They will tell you that you're adding cost to the project and that it's against the Wisconsin standards for solar siting, but that's not true. The landowners who are surrounding my lot, they have other land. They could be putting these in other places. They're choosing to put them right next to my lot. Their bad planning is not my problem. But back to my son's neurologist. He then said he himself would never raise children that close to such a project. The brain is electrical. Our feelings, the thoughts in our heads, our language development, and our learning are all dependent on this electrical system in our brains. And while there's no proof that solar utility just feet from a house will be harmful, there's no proof that it's not either. He said there are just simply no studies because there have been no meaningful studies done. The studies provided by the developers only show that it is safe to work near utilities for limited hours as a healthy adult when all the equipment is working properly. That's not proof of safety. That's one limited example. And the same is true about the impact on housing values. The very limited study that they provided is nothing but 20-some houses not surrounded like mine is. And as others have said, it's not even in our region. And there's a reason. There's no houses. There are no projects that surround houses like mine's proposed to be. Like medicine, there are things that planners can do to protect health, safety, and investment. First is setbacks. So the 10 feet setbacks. Long jumpers jump further than 10 feet. In the Olympics, most long jumpers jump 29.36 feet. And I have garden hoses longer than 50 feet. These are not setbacks that will accomplish anything to protect neighbors. In Jefferson County, Wisconsin, the setbacks for houses surrounded like mine is 250 feet. This was already accepted in Wisconsin. These setbacks do not restrict the project. They have other alternative parcels they can use. There's other available land in Gilman, other land in Pierce County, and other landowners. And the landowners who surround me have other land that they could be putting the parcels on. A reasonable setback of 250 to 300 feet protects people, farms, livelihoods, and investments from the unknown. Not having reasonable setbacks means you're allowing a science experiment to go on in Pierce County. You're allowing them to experiment on us. Please do not allow this project without the proposed setbacks or protections. Please protect us and our investments by putting in meaningful protective setbacks. I just like some of the things that they've said about the state law for CUPs. There's something called intent of law in land use. They're reading it literally, whereas in land use, it's typically based on intent of law. The intent of law is not to give them permission to surround my house and force me out. And by the way, just as a side note, again, I have offered them to buy my house, and they continue to tell me, we're not that kind of developer. So I've given them many options. I've offered them easements. I've offered them to buy my house. They're choosing to do this. That is not the intent of the solar legislation. The intent is that we don't just say, no, I don't like solar. And that's not what you're hearing tonight. You're hearing, we're okay with solar, we just don't like what they're proposing. And I believe I will then let my son, let me see, yeah, my son come, oh wait, no, I do have one more thing, sorry. One of my other concerns is the process that's gone on in the town of Gilman. The next step will be driveway ordinances and road maintenance. The town chairman for the town of Gilman is one of the leaseholders, so he'll be making close to $1 million+ on this project. The way the town of Gilman driveway permit reads, they will turn the permit into this leaseholder. He will then be able to say yay or nay to the driveways that surround our houses with no other process. So now I'm done, and I'll have my son come up.
Thank you. Alicia. This is for Kenneth?
Yes.
Thank you.
My name is Kenny Cosgrove. I'm 14 years old. 8 years ago, my father died, and I inherited 1/3 of 40 acres. My mom bought my brothers out of their share of the land with the money she had saved for my college tuition. She thought this was a good idea because we live in a part of Gilman with a lot of houses close to Highway 94. A lot of our friends used to want to move to our neighborhood, but not now. Now that we're bordering the solar utility project. For some reason, lots with houses on them are given more protection in this proposal than lots without houses, including mine. Because of all the wetlands, I may not be able to split it and put as many houses on as possible. And now with the proposed solar plan, I'll be able to put even less houses on my land where it's close to a transformer. And not as many people will want a view of solar panels as most people want a view of trees. So we will have less people we can sell my land to. What will happen to my college savings if this project is approved? I have land rights too. Why are my rights not being protected? In 6th grade science in Spring Valley Middle School, we learned that a big risk with solar panels is wildfire. Now I worry that my house will burn down. They say the solar panels will survive a baseball hit, but baseballs make a much bigger dent in my mom's car than hail does. True story. What if the company gets mad because I like to hit baseballs in my field? Will I be able to get any baseballs back? What if there's an accident? Will I be blamed? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Samantha Letourneau.
Okay, so on the map, I actually own the land where it says Eric Rodencall.
What street are you around? 890th?
So it's in the top left on 890th.
Okay.
So my boyfriend and I actually both bought that land about a month ago, and last week we found out about this project. So there hasn't been much communication with us due to the ownership change with the company or really anybody in the county, which is complicated because we just moved. But what we've heard from this is basically our whole sunset view is going to be gone. And we're going to have to stare at 12-foot tall solar panels for as long as we can imagine. Yeah, go ahead. This is my
I'm Wayne Letourneau, Samantha's father, and again, she asked me to come up just to kind of give a bearing point to this process. I have 40 years of experience in the industrial and commercial construction and development business. I'm from the Twin Cities area. I actually live in Woodbury. And these two kids, about a month ago, put their life savings at 21 and 24 years old into the property on 890th that was owned for about a year and a half by the Rodencalls. So they own the 29.5 acre parcel on 890th. As well, my kid and her boyfriend made the decision to get the hell away from the grip of the Met Council of the Twin Cities and New York developers, and came to the rolling pastoral farmland of this area because we fell in love with it, from Spring Valley all the way up through to Baldwin, quite frankly. It's a wonderful area. They plan a future on this land, and they are so excited to live in a 110-year-old farm home without buildings and a future, including beautiful sunsets that we've enjoyed as guests of their home in the short month or so they've been there. They've been completely smoked and blindsided by this process. And it's part of an action, frankly, that we are going to undertake, legal action through an attorney and a law firm in western Wisconsin, well-credentialed in both counties. And we're going to exhaust options for these kids because, first and foremost, I want to be unequivocally clear. We're for renewable. But this is a dark horse project, in my humble opinion, with my background and my experience, that is fraught with hurry up, let's go. We've done due diligence. This is the state statute. Take it or leave it. Well, there's an option here, folks, and it's pound sand. So I appreciate your diligence in putting strong restrictions and stringent constraints, especially on setbacks, vegetation. We're concerned about the health impacts. These kids bought this property to see beautiful farmland on both sides. And that one side to the west is going to be completely smoked with solar panels. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Nick Danger. Welcome, Nick.
Good evening. I'm actually a landowner with these panels being placed on. I've lived in the township for about 30 years, actually over 30 years now. I find it interesting. I'm going to talk first of all real quickly, but about frequency and sound. In a good chunk of this project, there are electrical wires, high tension wires that go through this project. They're on my property, around a half mile of my property. Those panels will be next to it. Okay, so when we start talking about electrical currents, we start talking about sound, I guarantee you can walk under those right now, and there's sound and there's electrical, right? I mean, it's just there. And those lines were improved, and they still are being improved by Excel. I don't see anybody coming out and talking about putting up, hey, what about these new lines and more attention on there? I don't hear anybody saying that. I don't hear anybody complaining about that because those are already there, apparently. Those are a bigger problem than these solar power panels will be. Those do cause a lot of ELF and all those types of low frequencies. And so I just think it's kind of interesting we start talking about that. And when Jerry Land, who just this spring added, redid their poles, the same thing. I mean, I realize they have to do those things. They run through my other end of my property. Again, nobody's out there complaining about that. And again, because they exist. And again, they're going to get bigger. When we start talking about vegetation setbacks, I think we run into a very slippery slope in the agrarian area. When we start talking about buffers and what we're going to put in those buffers. We look at solar power panels, we're talking about these things are not much higher than a row of corn. Suddenly, if my neighbor, if I put it in corn, suddenly they don't want corn because you know what? That interferes with their sunset. Those things are high. Maybe you feel like you're in a prison. So now what are you going to tell us that we have to put in beans instead? Suddenly, all of a sudden, we're going to dictate what kind of vegetation we're putting in here. We're going to put trees up because you don't want to have a buffer. Like, if I put up a pole shed, which is on my property, if I put up a pole shed, suddenly I have to put trees up so you don't see my pole shed? That doesn't make any sense. This is an agrarian area. I know some people, they move out in these areas and they think like it's going to be this provincial kind of thing where it's just, all beautiful and everything. But guess what? There's manure spread. There's sound too. You know what? My neighbor has a dryer. That thing goes on, I hear it. I hear it a lot. And I mean, that's what happens. That's what it is. Tractors, smells, all those things. I know it sounds picturesque when you look at a picture, but it isn't always that picturesque. And we start to look at, when somebody brought up about payments and what just the landowners are making money. Well, you know what? There is a payment to the county. There is a payment in this to the county. There is a payment in this to the township. I believe that payment to the township right now would increase our budget by like 50%. Well, where is that money going to come from elsewhere? Are we going to raise our taxes? Are we going to do that? I don't know. Probably not. Nobody will be in favor of that. I can guarantee when we have school referendums, we have people hoarding in there just to make sure that we don't raise our, that by $100,000. Well, we're getting $125,000 a year on that. So this idea of like, we're not getting anything back, oh yeah, we're getting something back. And then we start talking about family, because I guess we can start bringing our family. My son, who is now actually started his master's at Madison in GIS, and he's an ag science, he's an environmental studies major. And, I'm looking at their future, because right now in this community, in these areas, we all like the idea that it's going to be this 25-head dairy barn, and they're going to be just pasturing out there, and that isn't what's happening. We all know that's not what's happening. The family farms are going away. It's more corporate farming. It's more corporate farming. We all know this. And it's 1,200 head, 2,400 head. That's what the farming is of tomorrow. That's what the farming is right now. So this idea, there's no more dairy down by me anymore. The last dairy farm, Amit's, they pulled the plug, I don't know, what was that, a year ago or so? There's no dairy anymore. It's gone. This idea, this quaint little area where there's cows roaming in the pasture. I have cattle. But I mean, even that is diminishing because we all know that it isn't sustainable anymore. And when this is an opportunity, if we want to talk about family, this is an opportunity for me to keep this property and not develop it for more housing, for more, 1,200 head dairy farms, I guess. This is a way for me to actually keep this property in my family's name for generations. That's really the reality of it. I'm almost 60 years old this year. I'm not going to see this thing expire. It's going to be, when I'm retired and I'm dead, it'll be my family's name, and it's going to continue to be that. So it's not just for today; it is for our generation to pass on to our family as well.
Thank you, Nick. Sonia Thompson also, she did not want to speak, but she is in favor of this. So I just wanted to get that on the record. That was all we had listed on our piece of papers. If anybody else would like to say something here, if you just want to keep it quick here and stuff, but you're welcome to come up. They will be. I was just waiting for everybody to make sure all our. Okay, thank you. Yes, Mr. Picata.
All right. I did receive a number of emails from folks. I did receive one from John Schaefer, which is basically the remarks that he gave. I received one from Eric Turner, who indicated that he is supportive of the project. He's supportive of the 150-foot setback from residences, and he's also supportive of a 10-foot setback from property lines. I received the email from Brad Turner. He's also in support of this. He's against the vegetative buffer, and he thinks that the maximum setback should be 50 feet. I received an email from Shane Lucking, a member of Marshawn Farms, and he's supportive. He also feels that the condition relating to assurances for decommissioning is unreasonable, and he also feels that the vegetative buffer is unreasonable. And then I also received an email from Scott Cohenin, who is the executive director of the Wisconsin Conservative Energy Forum, and he is in support of this project and discussed revenues that would come to the town and the county. And then lastly, I received an email from John and Sonia Lenars, who are in support of the project and indicated that they thought that this project would help with road issues. And that was all the emails that I got.
Thank you, Randy. Is there any further public comment? Yep.
Where's this company from that wants to do this?
Is that mic on over at the table, please? There, we're good.
Our company is based out of Brooklyn, New York, and we are located all over. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yep. Any further public comment? Dean?
One more thing, it just seems like, I hope you don't vote on this tonight. I think you just need to work through this a little more before you vote on it just tonight.
Thank you, Dean. You're on the Gilman Town Board, Dean? No, okay. Okay, seeing there is no further public comment, I will declare the public hearing closed. Committee have any questions? Or would you guys like to answer any of the statements that the public was, address them?
I have a terrible time hearing you. I'm used to reading lips, and I am screwed here.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. All right. Okay. Sorry. Okay, great. So, thank you everyone for your comments. I mean, I think, we definitely want to address some of the issues that have been brought forth. So we'll keep it brief here. I think we have covered some of these in previous times. So the first is glare. The first point with glare from the panels is that the panels do have anti-glare coating. Nonetheless, there is some potential for glare early in the morning and late in the evening. And so what we do is we have the panels move back to flat before, so that reduces the impact from glare. And we have also agreed to condition number 16, that the panels will have a resting angle of 60 degrees. So we do not anticipate any impacts from glare. The second is sound. We feel like we have addressed sound, and we have incorporated the setback from the inverter to property lines to ensure that there will not be impacts to sound. And also have agreed to a post-construction sound survey as laid out in condition number 11. So it's something we will be monitoring, and we do not anticipate sound from this facility at residents' homes. The third is fire safety. So, nothing is flammable in the components of these projects. I mean, they're designed, the panels, the wiring, and the inverters are all designed to protect against the possibility of any fires. Nonetheless, we will be meeting with emergency services as laid out in condition number 22 to discuss processes and how we can communicate effectively with local emergency services. I also heard mention about recycling. So the panels, they are made of glass, aluminum, and copper, and the market is growing for panel recycling programs. We anticipate that there will be substantial recycling programs by the time that this project reaches the end of its useful life. The market is growing rapidly for these projects, and so we do expect, the market to grow for folks to recycle. Someone's going to want to make money off of it, so we do anticipate that. And then just a couple of clarifying points here. So, Nicholas, we heard your concern about, getting your baseball back from the field, and, there will be communication between the owner and the operator of the project, and their contact information will be publicly available. So anytime that there's any issue with the facility, which will also be monitored, then you will be able to contact the owner and operator of the facility and get your baseball back. One other point is that, I want to be very clear that we're not against a vegetative buffer. We are offering a vegetative buffer. We are offering it to people who do not have existing vegetation and who are not participating in the project. So we are offering that, and we want to offer that. Another clarifying point, we have not offered any bribes. We have met with neighbors, and it seems like we may have may have missed someone, and I do apologize that we have not been able to meet with you folks yet. But we have been meeting with folks and addressing their concerns, and we're going to continue to do so. And then the last is property value. I mean, this is one of the issues that comes up that we hear first, and we have looked at it very closely. And we did issue kind of this formal independent analysis that looks into property values next to existing solar farms, discusses tax assessors and real estate agents as well. And Frank, do you want to talk a little bit more about that one?
Yeah, Frank Fennessy representing Ranger. We too, others commented in the staff report about the LBJ study, which we thought was, because it's in the desert and because of its conclusions, really had limited value to support the conversation. It was based on opinions of real estate agents, but wasn't based on a rigorous sales analysis. We have asked that the property value impact study that we prepared, which looked at 8 or 9 different locations around the country. One of the speakers noted that, frankly, there are not a lot of solar developments that have been in service of this size around the United States and in the state of Wisconsin, particularly at this latitude of the town of Gilman or in Pierce County. However, there is a large 100 megawatt facility over near Forest Lake across the border of Minnesota, and one of the studies did deal with the North Star project there. I just want to read the conclusion of this study, and believe me, we're in the business of wanting to know real estate values to be able to understand where those are. This is what the study concluded. We have also reviewed studies prepared by other real estate valuation experts that specifically analyze the impact of solar facilities on nearby property values. And this is the key point. These studies found little to no measurable and consistent difference in value between the test area sales and the control area sales attributed to the proximity to solar farms and are generally considered a compatible use. Further, there was a fair amount of local assessor input and opinions sought, including in the county where North Star is located. And they said the following: local assessors have noted that there is no evidence of negative property value impacts due to proximity of a solar farm, and local brokers have noted that there has been no effect on pricing, marketing time, or conditions of sale. So that's we asked this study to be put in the record, and we can debate really till the cows come home. We have evidence. If there's contrary evidence, certainly bring it forward. It informs the industry and informs project discussions like this, but it's based on an analysis and real data. So that's what we have to say about that, and we'll continue to have the dialogue. I don't know the facility wants to know.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
So we're not proposing 10-foot setbacks. We have worked with the town of Gilman to discuss 50-foot setbacks from property lines, and 100 and. Okay.
Okay. Anything further? Okay.
So I think those are the main issues that we'd like to address at this point. From our perspective, we have fully complied with and exceeded the ordinance. We have been invested and engaged with this community for over 2 years and will continue to do so, and are absolutely willing to work on all of these conditions, and we think that this project should be approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to say I appreciate everybody coming out here tonight. voicing your concerns for or against. We don't take this lightly, just so you all understand that. And we try to, the whole thing is, as things come in front of us, we try to work with the adjoining landowners along with companies to make things happen and try to find, we get a swing at it right away. So we try to do things right in the first place here. So I just want everybody to know that we don't take this kind of stuff lightly. So it's never an easy decision, because I know it's an emotional subject for a lot of people. So with that, does the committee have any questions? Or
Yes, I've just got a couple of few clarifications. As I work down through the construction, you have some of the details. How long is the construction process expected to take?
18 months.
It's
It's expected to take 12 to 18 months.
12 to 18 months, okay. When talking about the glare and glint study, is the glare and reflection mainly from the support? I'm thinking the black panels, of course, they are glossy, but where's most of that glare come from?
If you don't mind, I'm going to call up Brian Karchowski. He's our technical expert from Stantec. I think he can speak to this.
Sure, if I understood your question correctly, the glare, potential glare from a solar facility would come from the panel itself, not from its supports or from other aspects or other other elements of the design. And to reiterate Emily's comment from before, panels that are constructed in industry today have an anti-reflective coating. So they're more absorptive than reflective. And again, another point that Emily made is that the resting angle of the panels will be at 60 degrees just prior to and following sunset, so that we don't see any glare because those are the times when we would experience the greatest glare.
I see. Yeah, I was thinking if it was a support system, that could be easily mitigated just by, painting them a different color, but it is the panels themselves. Okay. As far as the sound analysis, I'm not familiar with the technology. Is this from the inverters and such, are these a consistent sound? Are they intermittent? What's the nature of it beyond the decibels?
The nature of the sound is primarily from inverters associated with the design. And that is, they do give off a hum during power production. A hum that is typically associated with the fans that are cooling the inverters at the time that power is being inverted and generated.
And so whenever the sun is shining, basically, is when they would be working.
That's correct. In the nighttime, solar facilities do not produce sound.
I see. Okay. As far as the vegetation, is there any need for runoff control? I'm particularly concerned about the wetland area. What is your plans for mitigating any possible runoff during the construction phase? I'm mainly speaking of.
Sure. As I'm sure folks on the Land Management Committee would know, this project will be required to get an NR 216 permit from the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. And that permit will stipulate best management practices that are used during construction to basically avoid erosion problems. In some of the conditions, the Land Management Committee noted unforeseen erosion, and we feel that the state statutes or the state standards properly address this within the NR 216 permit, in that the NR 216 permit requires a weekly inspection during construction of all best management practices that are utilized to stop erosion during construction. And 24 hours after, an inspection within 24 hours after anything greater than 0.5 inches of rainfall. So when we say unforeseen, there are more than adequate checks within the required inspections of an NR 216 permit at the state level to catch erosion problems that would be starting and to address those, because a corrective action log is also required as part of that permit, and that you show that you have noted the corrective action that needed to be taken and that it was taken and corrected. With regard to wetlands, if there is grading within proximity of a wetland, now I'm talking about rough grading associated with the land surface, there will be requirements in that 216 permit for silt fence around sensitive resources such as that, wetlands, waterways. Other best management practices can be utilized in those conditions, such as silt socks, things like that. There also the DNR also likes to see signage ups to keep construction crews out of sensitive resources. Again, now, in areas where there would be significant land grading, we do have panels that are proposed within some farmed wetlands on this project, but that activity is very light on the land. It just really consists of a pile driver driving up and down, and would not constitute a regulated impact by the DNR or the Corps of Engineers.
And as far as the construction is concerned, is it phased in? Do you address all these parcels all at once? Do you go from one parcel to another? Do you do 2 or 3 parcels at once and then move on? What's the timing of the construction process?
Sure. With regard to construction, they do it in phases, but construction within the types of construction, the phasing within types of construction, meaning they would go in first, and this is some presumption on my part, but they would go in first and create all the access roads to the land that they need. They would provide for some, if they have to improve some access roads, which is not anticipated, but if they had to improve some access roads, they would do so. Then they would go in with the pile drivers and do all the pile driving on all of the PV arrays. So construction follows that type of process. They don't do the pile driving on a segment or a portion of the property or a portion of the, like, one PV area block, and then do the next phase, meaning, attach the panels and do all the collector lines. They do it per element. So pile driving, installation of collection lines, installation of panels. So you'll see those things being started and then taking all the way to completion before another aspect is started.
I see. And sorry I'm jumping around, I'm kind of just going through my list here. This technology, it's ever evolving and actually evolving quite quickly. Is your setup kind of adaptable as new technologies may come around to where, this may become obsolete in 10 or 15 years? Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yes, I think what you're referring to is a question of like repowering the project. If, let's for say, the panels that are utilized on this project are like 400 kilowatt panels, and the 20 years in the future, a marketable difference or a marketable step up in technology is allowing the same panel design to meet 600 kilowatts. Then it becomes a question of cost-benefit analysis on the part of the owner as to whether or not to do something like that. But again, that would constitute a change in the project, and I would believe they would need to come back to this group to get an approval of that repowering, because it would require construction.
Okay. One area talks about restoring it to, or areas used for ag purposes will be restored to their pre-construction conditions. Are you going to be doing surveys before development occurs, so we know what those baseline conditions are?
Yes, the applicant will work with the county to make sure that there is a clear understanding of what the conditions are on all the local roads, drainage infrastructure, prior to the start of construction. If that requires videotape, like a GoPro attached to a car, that is something that is typically done and can be done, so that there's hard documentation with regard to that pre-existing condition. The applicant will work with the county to clearly define how to document that pre-existing condition prior to construction.
Okay. I may have some more questions later, but I'll be quiet for now.
Thank you, Dr. Sandman. Does anybody else have any questions?
Let's say we get some baseball-sized hail. You talk about your indemnity here for returning it, to its original state. How are these going to stand up? You talk about salvage value. If there is no salvage value, it goes back. It goes. You don't like one of our conditions in here, but if the damn things ain't worth nothing, we can't hardly give you a value on that back against it. So how do they stand up in that type of natural?
Sure. Panels go through testing. I believe I have the USF standards, the United Standards Laboratory, USL. I believe it is. They go through testing through that laboratory, and impact is one of the testings that is done on panels, and they can withstand a rather substantial hail storm and not take on damage. Now, of course, there are limits to the standards, and there always are anomalies associated with a storm, like baseball-sized hail would be an anomaly, and one that would damage most everything out there. In those circumstances, the owner-operator of this facility would have insurance on this development.
These things are extremely expensive to insure.
But that is one of the things. I mean, it would be foolhardy to have a facility of this magnitude and not have an insurance policy in place.
We wouldn't be able to build the project if we didn't have
Yeah,
insurance.
I understand that, but I mean, as an insurance company,
But
I sit on a board for a small mutual, and as an insurance company, these things are one of our worst nightmares.
Yeah, yeah. And what happens to the panels after they're damaged?
Yep.
In the case of a panel being damaged, it would be recycled. And I know that recycling is a question that's come up in the proceedings tonight. And I would point to the fact that there are companies now, panel production companies, that actually have recycling programs in place for the panels that they sell. So recycling is actually moving at warp speed associated with the development of recycling programs. So, there is a lot of value in the material of a panel, the glass, the aluminum, the copper, that does give some value. So in the case of like an insurance, it would compensate the insurance company to a certain extent with regard to payout. They would seek that. So they would seek, so things like this would not go to the landfill.
So they're not like a wind turbine that has to be hauled to Colorado Springs to be recycled because that's the only landfill that'll take it, or see
Correct.
one in western Iowa.
Correct.
Go ahead, Neil.
I have a question probably for Andy or Brad. Just, I'm not even going to pick one of these boundaries, but let's just say generally, if the company wanted to change the number of panels they have in one of these boundaries, double it or cut it in half, they have that flexibility without coming back to us? If the landowner says it's okay, if they have an agreement.
Within the fenced area,
Yeah.
essentially? Yes.
So the inverters could move too?
Unless there's a condition relating to a distance the inverter has to be from either a residence or perhaps a property line.
Okay, okay.
I have a suggestion. I would suggest that we work our way through staff recommended conditions, and anyone that has an objection from Ranger Power, we have a discussion about it. Sound all right?
I think that's a good point.
All right. Let's start with, what I'm going to do is kind of facilitate this, and Brad, who was largely the guy who drafted, he delved into the detail on this thing, and so he will talk about what our intent was and what we're intending to accomplish. All right, so we'll start out with number 2. The inverter shall be set back a minimum of 300 feet from any non-participating landowner lot line. Brad, tell us about that.
That was largely based off of the studies that were provided by Ranger Power, as well as the studies we read independently. Sound impacts and the electromagnetic impacts. Everything talked about 150 feet, and it would near background levels on one aspect. You know, I think the sound, it talked about it would reach background levels. And I think on the electromagnetic, it said it would near background levels at 150 feet. We took that to say, we want to make sure we're at background levels and that there is no impact. So instead of the 150 feet, we went with 300. Also, a side note, the sound study that was provided by Ranger Power, every assumption on that sound study that said it will have no impact on sound is based off of the assumption an inverter is 250 feet from the property line. So they are proposing some of their maps show setbacks of inverters of less than 250 feet. So if this plan is approved as they're presenting it, the sound study would have to automatically be redone because in it, it says any inverter closer than 250 feet would need to be recalculated. So that is how we came up with 300 feet, just to make sure any impact would be basically gone to a property owner.
And our goal in this is to not necessarily treat properties that don't have residences on them differently than those that do, because there's always the potential for a residence. And if you make it so that it's closer to those that don't have residences on it, that certainly has an impact on the value of that particular land in somebody else. And so the goal is to treat all properties the same.
If possible, could we address that point?
I didn't understand.
Sorry, could we speak to that point, to the sound study point? Okay, thanks. Good, Brian, go then.
Just a couple points of clarification with regard to the noise study that Stantec prepared. The 250-foot distance, or a minimum of 250-foot distance, in the conclusions is based upon from the sensitive receptor, or in this case, like a residence, not from a property line, which would not be considered a sensitive receptor. The 300-foot distance that's proposed within the condition, we feel is somewhat onerous. It takes away some flexibility associated with the final design, in that we meet the 250 feet from the residence. We do have, there are some inverters that come closer to property lines, but in this situation, the impact, you're talking about a property line that has no residence within proximity of that inverter. It's just either an agricultural field primarily. So we feel that it's actually more appropriate to address this concern not by setting a greater setback, but rather agreeing to the post-construction sound study and then taking mitigative measures for any inverters that may be considered problematic to a sensitive receptor. Mitigative measures that can be used on some inverters are primarily mufflers. They're not immediately placed on all inverters because it does have an impact in the efficiency of the inverter, albeit very small. But the mufflers are attached to both the intake and the exhaust, where the noise is being generated from, and can significantly reduce any sound production from that inverter that would be problematic.
So what was your, I'm sorry, just to clarify, what was then your proposed setbacks? You said 250 from residences. That doesn't unfortunately address what they were mentioning about future residences, though. Could you just, for clarification, what was your recommended setback for these inverters?
In this circumstance, trying to identify future residents would be extremely difficult, a problematic thing to do. And so in that case, that's why I'm saying in a circumstance where an inverter is identified as problematic, there are mitigative measures to take on that inverter to minimize the sound levels associated with it. In this, if someone wanted to put up a home next to an inverter, obviously the first thing would be, maybe siting the home a little bit farther away would be a better thing to do. But if that is not plausible, then actions can be taken to mitigate the sound that is generated from that inverter.
Perhaps any inverters that they would have closer than 300 feet to a property line needs to be muffled right now.
Well, again, I would point to the condition that we're agreeing to with regard to this sound study, that we are accepting to do a sound study following a post-construction sound study, and would much rather reserve that for that time rather than to agree to it as a condition to the project.
I would propose that we reduce the minimum setback for inverters to 250 feet instead of 300.
Can we put a provision in if in the future a residence is built closer than 250 feet from an inverter that they would then install mitigation measures?
Well, if we change the setback from 300 to 250, that would be the property line, not to the residence.
Oh, true.
So it would protect those neighboring properties.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Yes.
Zoning or conditional use permits go two ways. The future builder can't infringe any closer to this guy than this guy can to them.
Good point.
All right, any more discussion on number 2? If not, we'll move to number 3.
Let's find out if this is, this should be acceptable, but they don't always accept everything that they have accepted already. So is that acceptable to go to 250 feet? We're not going to come back to that again?
From that standpoint, if we're looking for a compromise on this issue, I would point to the studies, the other studies that show that we're achieving background at about 150 and propose then a 150-foot setback to inverters to property lines.
So the discretion of the committee, would you like to reduce it to 250, or would you like to leave it at, or 150, or would you like to leave it at 250?
Just allow clarity that
150 was from residents, when we talk about the noise study, and we're still talking about property lines here.
I believe that we need to talk about property lines. I think it needs to be property lines, not residences. I think residences is not the measuring stick we need to use. It's got to be property lines.
That way it stays clean.
Yep. Continue on.
What was the consensus?
What's the consensus?
Well, it seemed like the consensus of the committee was to leave it at 250 at this point.
250 is the number that I would like to see because it allows the adjoining property owner the ability to move, to have his side yard within 10 feet of the property line. So it doesn't take away from him. Otherwise, these people would be taking 100 or 90 feet away from the adjoining property owner.
All right, number 3, minimum 50-foot vegetative buffer. Brad, you want to talk about the rationale related to that?
That was based off of largely the APA study for the vegetative buffering. That's how the 50-foot came. That was the recommendation from there. The rationale for putting buffering in was based off of our zoning code requirements of screening, as well as the land management policy of relating to screening.
Their top plan as far as vegetative buffers.
No, not that I'm aware of it, but they wouldn't need to, and typically they wouldn't. You know, also our recommendation to include this has a lot to do with the history of this committee. And if you think back over the past few years, how many different projects we've seen, whether it be commercial, industrial, or utility type uses, and in every single case, we have required buffers, whether it be a berm and screening. You know, we do berms a lot with the scattered balsams offset. And so that was our thought in requiring that. And again, what we're trying to do with the vegetative buffer and with the setbacks is make it so that this solar project is not the dominant feature on the landscape. It needs to, you know, we're looking at community health here. We're trying to make it so that this doesn't change the character of the area, that it blends in to the degree that that is possible.
At least minimize.
Minimize. And it's not to render it invisible, it's to render it visibly unobtrusive.
Gotcha.
And the applicant did express concerns with requiring tree plantings due to shade issues. Mm-hmm. And so, again, working to the unobtrusiveness of it, that was the rationale for reaching 7 feet or the fence height for the majority of the growth, just to break up that view without compromising the project by putting in tall trees.
And repeat the rationale behind the 50-foot number.
The 50-foot number is the number that was recommended in the APA synopsis of their recommendations relating to the siting of large solar farms.
I see, okay.
Andy, could you repeat for me, if this barrier dies out, whose responsibility is it? Is it the power companies or the landowners' responsibility to keep this buffer there?
Typically, it's the folks who own the facility, because technically the buffer is associated with that. You know, we've had cases down with the Red Wing Airport where we had trees that died, and you know, the Red Wing Airport was responsible for maintaining those. But in that case, they actually owned the property.
Everybody reaches for their pocket.
Just checking.
Yeah.
Any more discussion on the vegetative buffer, or should we keep moving along?
Unless they have a response.
Well, they're going to have responses to all of these, I'm certain.
I think we have just a couple questions on the vegetative buffer.
Whose is it?
What is it? Oh, that's mine.
That could be mine, too.
Could be, well, here,
I
take
got
them
one.
both and get rid of it.
Is it out here? That's yours. That's yours.
Worried about cell phones.
Someone must have been fooling with my truck.
That's what it is.
What's that? Woo, that was loud. Right.
He's locked out.
He's locked out.
That was all a ploy.
I think we just had a question on the vegetative buffer point. So the condition states if the vegetation is inadequate to serve as a buffer, new plantings of trees, shrubs, and grasses. Can we just, I think we're just trying to understand what exactly it's proposing, and also just kind of point out that the zoning code doesn't require the buffer, but it does allow it. And again, to kind of just state that we are proposing this buffer outside of non-participating residences, where necessary, and where there's no existing vegetative buffer as well. So, and also just keeping in mind that the perimeter of the project is 18 to 20 miles long, so it is a substantial length and cost to the project. So.
All right, I heard about 2/3 of what you said. As far as what it would consist of, I think that was part of the question. I think that our intent was for you guys to work with the Land Conservation Department to ensure that whatever is planted there is not going to get taller than we want it to, because we recognize there's a shade issue. And also the concern was raised earlier that you want to be able to, at some point, be able to convert it back into agricultural land. And so the Land Conservation Department could certainly help with appropriate types of vegetation that would fit that bill. And so that was the thought behind asking you to work with the Land Con.
We had a situation one time where people wanted tall trees planted. When the trees got planted tall, then they wanted short trees planted so they could see what was going on. So we've been down both roads of this deal.
I would note too that, the vegetative buffer could be waived or modified with the consent of the adjacent property owner. And so there's, certainly the potential in cases where it's, you're butting up to a cornfield to have a discussion with the guy and do something reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
If I was an adjoining property owner that had corn in my field, I wouldn't want trees there, so there might be more people that you could work with than you think so today.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, did you want to say something? Yeah.
With regard to this condition, I think the language of the condition is overly broad from the standpoint of where this would actually be employed. I think, as it's stated within our response to the condition, we would work with the landowners with regard to the sensitive receptor. Now, that being the house, in its view, with regard to a reasonable buffer associated or landscape buffer. But reasonable from a standpoint that I guess, you would probably note that the hills out there are rolling. So there are residences that are at a much higher elevation, and no amount of vegetative buffer would really be able to address the condition. I'd also like to point out, with regard to the overly broad text of the condition, the perimeter of the project, believe it or not, is about 18 to 20 miles when you add in all of the perimeter. So that's why I'm saying it's overly broad in that aspect. I think that the condition should be rewritten to address the comment that the applicant will work with landowner to develop a reasonable approach for those areas where there is no obstructed view, or where there is no obstructed view. In the case of ownership, there is a little bit of a nuance that I should point out with regard to the vegetated buffer. The ownership is tied to leases with regard to the land. The lease is tied to the fence line. So with regard to the responsibilities associated with regard to the buffer, this may fall to the landowner and not to the applicant or the owner operator. Simply because in the case of a solar development, those elements or those aspects are not tied to necessarily a parcel boundary, rather a fenced PV array. Another point that I need to point or make with regard to the buffer is, even though we're agreeing to a 50-foot buffer, 150 feet from residence and a 50-foot from property line, there are often situations where that buffer expands to a much greater distance, or I shouldn't say buffer, that distance between fence and property line expands to a much greater difference. If we install or apply a vegetative buffer or a vegetation aspect to that buffer, it would limit in those circumstances where it's much more expansive, it would limit that landowner's capability of doing a complementary use, such as continuing ag within that distance.
No, our public comment is down here at this time. I'm talking about, I have the responsibility of keeping trees on my land. We're just going through and trying to figure all this out first, so, sorry.
Well, that may be the case that the lease only covers the land within the fence. Our concern isn't about necessarily what the lease covers. Our concern is addressing, mitigating impacts to other properties. And I would acknowledge that it may well be the case that there are many instances where perhaps the rolling topography or existing vegetation may in fact be adequate. And that's why the goal was not to address this in its entirety tonight, but to have you guys come back and present a vegetative management plan for how you're going to deal with all of those particular issues. And in some places, it may well be that not much is required. And that's fine. We're simply trying to treat all of the properties that are adjacent to your proposed project the same and ensure that the impacts are minimized, whether it's a residential piece or not.
Mm-hmm. And just to clarify, so the 50-foot vegetative buffer, the staff is not saying that it would be around the entire perimeter of the project, but it would be where it's necessary. Is that accurate?
That's accurate. It would be where it's
plan.
Necessary. It wouldn't necessarily have to be, a 50-foot strip out there. If you're on a 40 that's got a strip of woods that's on that edge, and it's on that, on the lessee's property, that may well suffice.
And is the intention of the staff behind the 50-foot buffer to be along the property line?
The buffers would just need to be between the property line and the fence. Where it would occur specifically, we just simply need there to be some sort of a vegetative buffer present.
And Andy, please correct me if I misstate, but yeah, I agree, there is some vagueness to that statement, but also your proposed statement of applicants will work with landowners to develop a reasonable buffer, that has quite a bit of vagueness in it as well. And I would be surprised if some of the people against this wouldn't put up some very, very stringent requirements of you. Nothing would be adequate, in other words. And I think, and again, please correct me if I'm misstating this, but if you work with the Land Conservation Department and identify, number one, those participating landowners who wouldn't necessarily need a buffer, and as Andy's pointing out, areas that already have sufficient current vegetation or topography, that could certainly be reflected in that plan that you put together. And as long as, you know, you have the feedback from those people who say you don't need a vegetative buffer or some indication of why the existing vegetation is, topography is adequate, then I would assume that we wouldn't necessarily we would be able to accept that.
Yep. Yep. And I think if there were instances where you couldn't come to an agreement with an adjacent landowner, you could certainly identify a default option that would, that's what you would use, because you work that out with LandCon, and it's going to grow to 7 or 9 feet or whatever is agreed upon. And so, yeah, there will be cases where I'm sure you wouldn't be in agreement with the neighbor, but it doesn't mean there's not a solution.
So I think that vagueness could work in your benefit as much as it could work against you. It's all how you work it out as far as the plan is concerned with the Land Conservation Department.
To keep moving along, or what's the, okay.
Well,
All right.
are they gonna have to go back and read? Is there?
My goal here is simply to work through the conditions and make sure that I'm less concerned about them being comfortable with the conditions. You guys need to be comfortable with the conditions.
Yep.
All right, moving on to number 4. Projects shall be set back a minimum of 150 feet to all above ground components from non-participating residences, at least 100 feet from property lines of non-participating properties, and 67 feet from all road rights of way. Property line setback may be waived or modified with consent of the adjacent property owner, but not to less than 10 feet. Notice of consent shall be submitted to the zoning office. Basically, somebody could waive it, and as long as there's an agreement that's given to us, the setback could be less than 100 feet from property lines. Committee comfortable with that? Keep moving?
Comfortable.
I am.
What about, well, I guess if you're the current landowner, that's your choice then, I guess.
Yep.
So, yep, comfortable.
All right, jump into number 6. That's the next one that they identified as having an issue with. Vegetative management plan shall be developed for the site, and and approved by the Land Management Committee, shall work with the Land Conservation Department in developing the plan, shall include trees, shrubs, seed mixes, vegetative maintenance, and weed control for the buffer, facility construction, as well as operations. Basically, we just want a plan, and that's the plan that we've been discussing. You know, this really ties very, very much into number 3. Okay, number 7. Construction main laydown areas shall be located at least 1,320 feet from any non-participating residences. Secondary laydown areas shall be at least 500 feet from non-participating residences. Brad?
The 1320 is a 40-acre piece. That was the whole rationale for it, to keep your main construction areas at least a 40 away from any house. This is one of the few conditions where we identify residences and not property lines, being that construction is temporary. We weren't provided information of how many main laydown areas would be needed, the duration of it. So the 40 seemed reasonable. We looked at the maps of what it was, and yeah, by my guess, I thought there was a handful of them. They're saying there's 3. I'm not disputing that. I don't know if that works for what their plan was, but again, we didn't have a lot of information to go off of. The 500 for the secondary, that was based off of looking at distances of panels to residences at their proposal. 500 feet looked to be about the average that they were proposing. So for something like this, again, a temporary construction, that's their average distance. Let's not put laydown construction areas closer than that. I would assume the size and the type of equipment being stored.
Is there some interstate definition of that?
I don't know the answer to that. Difference between the main construction and the secondary construction areas? Yeah. Yeah, there would be one main construction area and that would move around, you know, throughout the project, and then the second would be more of a trailer, less temporary.
Our goal with this particular item was, like Brad said, simply to try to ensure that off-site residences that are not participating in this don't have a full-blown staging area, boom, right in front of them. That's the goal, is to minimize and mitigate the impact on non-participating residences during construction. And so, you know, we thought 1320 looked pretty good, but apparently it doesn't work as well as
If, Andy, just a question that I think was brought up, if we're limited to 3 and the traffic issues related to if we're going to increase it all in one area, it's going to have a greater impact, or maybe a negative impact.
Well,
Yeah,
you know, that was our intent in crafting that particular condition. Perhaps it doesn't work well, and maybe that condition isn't needed. Or, you know, that was our goal in doing that. And maybe there's another way to accomplish it, or maybe there's not. Committee, you got any thoughts on what to do?
Generally, when you have a major construction project going on, you try to limit access to county, state, and federal highways. You know, and that's the direction that I feel this should be pushed into. And they have a piece almost in the center of their project that's adjacent to the state highway. Perhaps that, you know, maybe that's where they should dump their stuff.
Well, they have in their comments to the town of Gilman agreed to use main roads to the degree that they can. And so perhaps this issue...
Well, main road, that's a relative term. You know, main road to Gilman Township might be a township road.
Okay, in the town recommendation and then the applicant response, the town asks that to the extent practicable, the owner-operator keep the heaviest vehicles in traffic to Highway 29 and County B, and that the primary staging areas be near that intersection. The response to that was Western Mustang accepts the request to minimize traffic on town roads and will make efforts to do so. However, they want to clarify that the use of these public roads is unavoidable due to project location and design. So, I think they've agreed to do what they can, but use of some town roads is obviously going to happen.
Yeah, well, that's understandable.
Can we, I'm sorry, can we jump back and with respect to the laydown area, 1,320 feet, the quarter mile for a laydown area. There was the discussion relating to sort of being cognizant of where major roads are, et cetera, and what you seem to be doing is saying, you know, I haven't looked at a map, but are you creating a situation where basically there's not going to be a single laydown area within the project area which is going to meet those criteria? And which is why I think the suggestion originally to say, you know, going from a quarter mile to a shorter distance, and I can understand coupling that with something saying, you know, stay off the town roads, use major roads, et cetera. But I mean, it's got to be there has to be somewhere, I mean, it's sort of like the 1,000-meter or 1,000-yard school zone or whatever, where you can't find a single spot within the area to actually stage from based on those criteria,
Well,
so,
you just tripled your distance.
sorry,
You tripled your distance when you went from to 1,000 yards.
1,000 yard, but,
You went
sorry, like,
1,320 feet to 1,000 yards.
but, right, but point being simply that if you're talking about a quarter mile from a residence, that's a very limited number of places within the area to begin with. And then if you're looking at that coupled with major roads, et cetera, it seems to me that if you said, keep it on the major roads, but that distance then has to be a little bit shorter, otherwise there's just potentially nowhere to go.
Here's what I would suggest, rather than, we're kind of mixing two different issues here, road use and laydown areas. I would suggest that we, and you might say this is too vague, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. Construction main laydown areas shall be located in a manner to minimize impacts to non-participating residences.
I mean, that would be the goal.
Yeah.
All right, committee, you guys cool with that?
Yep.
All right.
Just repeat what you said, please.
Oh, okay. Construction main laydown areas shall be located in a manner to minimize impacts to non-participating residences. Well, we tried to put distances on it, and that...
May I suggest something?
Yes, absolutely.
Since I don't know if there's really any definition between a main and a secondary laydown area, or it could certainly be, we're considering this to be a secondary. What about if construction main layout areas shall be located at least 500 feet and from residents and in a manner to minimize impacts? Put down 500 that we have for secondary?
I would be comfortable with that. All right, so where we're at now is construction main laydown areas shall be located at least 500 feet and in a manner to minimize impacts to non-participating residences. So at least 500 feet from non-participating residents and in a manner to minimize impacts.
Are you folks okay with that?
Jeff, Neil?
All right.
Okay.
All right, we are now on number 13, the decommissioning plan. Decommissioning plan shall include a decommissioning cost estimate prepared by a state licensed professional engineer. The cost estimate shall provide the gross estimated cost to decommission the solar facility in accordance with the decommissioning plan and these conditions. The decommissioning cost estimate shall not include any estimates or offsets for the resale or salvage values of the solar facility equipment and materials.
What's your guys' objection to that?
Sorry, can you
To
repeat
number
the question?
13, what was the objection there?
So we are happy to provide an updated decommissioning plan that includes a cost estimate, but we would like the resale and the salvage cost to be included in that cost estimate.
Why do you not want the resale costs included?
It's a changing number. So unless we're gonna keep getting updated decommissioning costs, it does, it doesn't work after time. And also, it's ultimately the county's responsibility, if we're doing this, to ensure decommissioning. It's probably something we'd hire out, but I don't know if, just in general, I think in our office, the zoning office, I don't want to be put in charge of finding out salvage rates and figuring those pieces out. Where if we just have the number for the cost of decommissioning, it simplifies things on the county's end.
It's just a flat number.
Yep.
But how is that number good? Is it based on today's dollars versus 30 years from now?
There would have
I
to
mean, the
be,
number's no good anyway from day one.
you know, I mean, there would have to be more, there would have to be updates periodically. We deal with this with mining too, you know, at what point is the bond no good anymore?
Right,
You know,
yeah. But when you said that the salvage cost, you don't have that number moves all the time. Well, so doesn't your original number. They both move. You know, I mean, it's estimate from today's dollars.
yeah. And I could be wrong, but I believe salvage rates fluctuate a lot more than inflation. But I'm not a salvage person. That's an assumption I'm making.
Again, this is just a recommendation, so you guys ultimately, what are you comfortable with?
Would it be acceptable to strike that last sentence and replace it with something like this estimate will be updated every 5 years, or
5 years is what I was thinking.
does that make any sense?
5 years seems like a
5 years.
reasonable time frame. I think, you know.
So we exclude the resale and salvage rates, but we update the numbers on a 5-year basis.
Who submits it?
Does that, but that then affects the decommissioning sureties. Those would then have to be adjusted every 5 years.
What?
If we have the decommissioning plan cost updated every 5 years, that means condition number 14, which is then how they put up security, would then have to fluctuate every 5 years. That doesn't sound doable.
It's tied together.
Yeah, that should be tied together.
What's that, Neil?
13 and 14 are tied together.
That's what I'm saying.
I mean, yeah, it's basically, it's the same number.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're happy to update the decommissioning plan every 5 years. So that includes scrap and salvage value.
I'd be,
They're okay with that as long as they can incorporate the scrap and salvage.
Okay, so we're good on 13 with the striking of the last sentence, and decommissioning plan should be updated every 5 years.
Andy, where do those salvage estimates come from?
The engineer would have to
The
provide
engineer, the
it.
state licensed professional engineer.
Could I ask who's the current corporation or deputy corporation counsel? I've always used to see that exact line management meetings that I don't recognize. That's corporation counsel or deputy.
Corporation counsel is not present right now.
Okay. I just feel it's important right now with amending contracts.
Amending what?
Well, we're amending, starting amended, that's all.
It's not adopted, it's not amended. We can't be amending something that's not adopted.
Thank you.
Okay. Again, condition number 13, I think we are okay with, which brings us to condition number 14, which we lay out 2 different ways for decommissioning security, letter of credit or adhered security. Ranger, I guess what's your preference on this, and is this no longer an issue now that we've got 13 the way you like it?
Well, so I mean, I think we do have questions about what number 14 is proposing. And, you know, I think as of now, what we've agreed to with the town of Gilman is a $500,000 bond posted before construction and then doubling that in year 15. And so, you know, I think that and then, you know, the other proposal we have is posting the full net decommissioning cost in year 15. Those are kind of the 2 proposals we have. So I think, you know, we're interested in understanding, you know, how that can relate to number 14. And I think we just need a little more explanation behind number 14 and what exactly it's saying. So, like, for example, letter A, you know, is the full decommissioning cost, is that assuming scrap and salvage value? And when is that being posted? Yeah, so I think we just need a little bit more clarity behind number 14, if it's going to be changed.
Those figures were based off of the previous condition 13, so that would have not included scrap and salvage. Now, with 13 written the way it is, those are the figures we're going to be using. Number 14 is about what form of assurance you'll be providing.
What form of assurance?
Yeah.
Okay. And so our proposal is acceptable in that case, posting the $500,000 before construction and doubling in year 15 in the form of a letter of credit. Is that accurate?
Us as staff are recommending the full amount up front or a tiered approach. Ultimately, it comes to our committee and what they're comfortable with.
It's hard to put a dollar figure on it when we don't have a decommissioning estimate.
Correct.
I just came from a solid waste management meeting tonight, and there is basically no dollar value in glass or aluminum today, no scrap values. If they're looking to trade this scrap value in to cover their bond, the county's not going to get involved in that. I'm more favorable to either a letter of credit or a bond up front. A bond up front is the cleanest, easiest way to do it. It might cost them a little more, but it's best for all parties involved.
I guess one question is, does the committee agree that there needs to be an assurance in place in the first 15 years?
I don't know why we would treat these any different than we do cell towers or anybody else. And we ask them to have an assurity, and I would expect that from these people also.
All right, then I would propose we leave condition number 14 as is. We've got two options. Why would we do that?
Well, that offsets the price for 10 years. I mean, it's not the... Would the committee want to just eliminate the option for a tiered financial assurance and just require the full amount right away?
Given that the decommissioning costs are unknown at this point, maybe providing the flexibility might be, keeping both options in. There might be rationale for that. And they can choose whichever fits.
So where are we at on this?
I believe the consensus was to leave it with the two options.
Okay. All right, then we move along to number 17. This one is relatively simple, I believe. Owner-operator shall install deer fencing around the solar equipment at a height of 7 feet. They have suggested it be at least 7 feet. I think that's kind of a no-brainer. All right, moving to...
Can I ask you, why is the word should used instead of shall?
Good point.
Staff mistake.
Should be shall.
It is now a shall. All right, jumping to number 21. Any unforeseen erosion issues shall be addressed to the satisfaction of the county. The point with that one was not necessarily during just construction when there's a 216 permit out. This is in the future, you know, there's an issue, we got a great big rain and something blew out. We just want you to fix it.
And I would add, that's pretty standard for most of the CUPs that we deal with. I see that condition in there on a regular basis.
For 21, I mean, we're not objecting. We really, we just think the condition is overly vague, and we'd like to kind of tie it to a standard.
Okay, so you're all right with it? Okay.
Presumably you mean an issue that rises to the level of something that's actionable.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So if there's a major ditch washes out, they want it
A
fixed up.
citation from the DNR, a citation from the county, or something like that.
Well, one year we had a big flood up in Martell country and 40 cows come shooting under the bridge. And we don't want them to be coming off of your land and shooting under the bridge. You know, that's the kind of thing we're looking at.
It's just
We're
a
looking at
matter
a
of,
large
you know.
scale deal.
Fair enough, yeah.
If some major ditching starts, that we just want that kind of stuff taken care of.
Got it.
Simple as that.
Understood.
We will not be doing daily inspections looking for issues. This is to address a major problem.
Yeah.
If you've got sediment crossing the town road, I think that then we need to address it.
Yeah.
Things like that. If you got a neighbor that's downstream, the water's coming off of your leased property and affecting his right to make a living, we're gonna address it. Those types of instances.
Yes.
All right, I have a suggested number 27. Applicant shall provide 6-month status reports to the Land Management Committee during construction.
Sounds good.
All right, go on to the,
Sorry, for number 27, which was, I'm not entirely sure you're reading the same 27.
I'm not looking at your list, I'm looking at our list, actually.
Okay, sorry about that.
So,
You want 6-month status reports once the project starts, Andy? 6,
Yes.
12, 18, 24, that type of thing?
until construction is done,
Every 6 months they
Yep.
come in and talk.
Yep. All right, now we're on to the last page where it says the Land Management Committee should also consider conditions, the following conditions which are recommended by the town of Gilman. The first stated that they needed to buy buy modules from a manufacturer with a combined score of 85 or higher. I'm not sure that that falls within the realm of what's a reasonable condition for us to place. They can get what they want, I think.
I would think so too. It could in fact inhibit them to actually do things better. I would
Strike
strike
27,
29.
strike 27.
Well, it's now 28, but yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
strike 28.
Well,
Got it.
we never included it as
I
a
know,
condition
I know.
just because we were
Yeah.
unsure whether you guys wanted to
Yeah.
do so. All right, the next one, the applicant shall provide a financial assurance for the construction of the project in the amount of $150,000 to Pierce County and the town of Gilman. Again, not sure what that exactly is for. They're going to be insured. I'm not sure that that's a necessary condition.
I don't know what that would be for. What, there's nobody from Gilman here? You're not on the board though?
I'm not, I'm the chair of
Okay. Why were you requesting the 150?
additional protection for the township should there be some unforeseen decommissioning event over the short term.
So that would be a refundable amount, and when the project is up and running? Was that your intent?
Our intent is, depending on what you guys did, they had consistently been talking about putting a bond in place for 15 years. The idea being that the value of the panels sort of ensures us all against any of these concerns. I wanted those monies to be in place until there was some sort of fully funded decommission bond in place.
Okay.
So that if the township incurs some costs up front, that those initial costs would at least be.
Okay.
Did we do that?
Yeah, we addressed that.
13, 14.
13 and 14.
13, 14 addresses that?
I believe it does.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, next one, the applicant shall keep and provide a list of all chemicals used for maintenance, for example, pesticides, herbicides, cleaners, including quantity and frequency of application of each. Applicants shall monitor soil, wells, and drinking water supplies for any and all chemical residue annually. Now, this is something we require on gravel pits and those sorts of things where there's a high likelihood for this, but
Is the major,
during construction.
Well, if we're gonna just my thoughts. If water has to be coming in and you're checking water, you should be checking them beforehand, if that's necessary.
You need to establish a baseline.
Right.
Before it starts, and then test it.
Exactly.
If it's gonna have any value at all.
Exactly. But when we're not digging down in,
That's what I'm thinking.
I don't know what would justify it when you're not digging down and welling and such.
I would agree.
But
I'm not sure it's.
But if they, I don't know what they have to do to clean those things and sprays and stuff, then, you know.
In their application, they said that basically rainwater kind of takes care of cleaning them.
Yeah, the panels are just washed with water. There's not chemicals used for that. So, you know, I think we are happy to provide a list of chemicals, but, you know, in terms of the soil, water and well monitoring, the problem from our perspective is just that, you know, any testing that's done post-construction that's unrelated to the project could be pinned on the project when it's in fact not the project. So, you know, that's maybe the compromise that we would propose.
I couldn't tell what she said.
I agree.
I'm really not
Sorry,
sure
did
what
you not hear
said on
anything?
any of that.
Okay, great.
I don't know, I can hear really well off that mic. Yours is, I just got a lot.
Sorry, maybe it's the mask. So first of all, the panels are just going to be washed with water. There's not going to be any chemicals. You know, I think we are happy to provide a list of chemicals that are used. It's a very short list in terms of vegetation maintenance. However, our issue with the soil, well, and water monitoring is that if there's testing that's done and anything comes back that's not related to the project, it could be pinned on the project, and that could cause a big issue for us. So.
Wow, I can hear you all of a sudden.
I know, it's crazy. I have to be right against the microphone, apparently. Apologize that you have not been able to hear me. Made this really painful.
What's the committee's desire on that one? You want to have a condition or not?
No. I don't think they're going to be using much of anything. And I would say, given the county a list of your chemicals or something, if there's that.
We can provide the county a list of chemicals. Yeah.
So the applicant shall keep and provide a list of all chemicals used for maintenance and stuff like that?
Yes, yes. You want to state that, Eric, please?
Though, correct?
Yes.
I mean, we still have to get our, you know, construction and stormwater permitting and all that, so that's, we're not out of that land no matter what.
Right.
Well, I think some of the agricultural people in here have to keep track of what they put on their land, when they put it on, what direction the wind is blowing, all of those types of things. I don't think that they're asking any more of you than that, and I think that if you just treated it like it was still ag land, that would perhaps satisfy some of the people in attendance.
Yep.
So what's the committee's pleasure?
How did you state that, Eric, please?
We would just strike anything after, just the applicant shall keep and provide a list of all chemicals used for maintenance. Period. I'm sorry. The applicant shall keep and provide a list of all chemicals used for maintenance.
To the county.
It's just the chemical list.
To the county,
Oh,
yes.
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 Sorry.
What, county or town?
Yes.
Okay.
Number 30, Andy. Or 31, whichever.
All right, last one, the applicant shall provide Pierce County and the town of Gilman relevant site plans, including erosion control plans, construction timelines, and other relevant construction information at least 75 days prior to the start of construction to allow the local governments an opportunity to review and comment on construction information. The construction team should meet with county staff and town representatives at a mutually agreeable date, not less than 45 days prior to the start of construction.
Sounds reasonable.
Sounds reasonable. So good?
Yeah, what was 27?
This should be the last one, this good.
Yeah, okay.
That sounds reasonable.
You guys want to leave that a condition?
What was 27 again, Andy, please?
27 is applicant shall provide 6-month status reports to the Land Management Committee during construction. And then this last one here will become number 29.
And could I just make a statement? I think it was brought up during the comment period about, when will this be reviewed? How will we know how things are going? Is it safe to say that this will be up for review in 2 years minimum?
This is more of a, what you would call kind of an establishment CUP.
So it'd be
Once it's
administrative?
actually up and functioning, it doesn't make too much sense to, necessarily renew it every 2 years. And so, much like when we permit an accessory residence, it's there. It's
just
not
see
like
it's
a
more of a-
mine where there's active crushing or, impacts.
Okay.
I mean, we could have them.
I
We
would
could
say,
bring, and we can actually, that's the other thing with the CUP, is if there are any issues, we can call them in whenever we need to.
Well, I'd hate to pull their permit and lose our lights. No, I think that these guys, once they're established, their financial viability is going to be exposed, and they're not, believe me, they're not going to want to not do what they say they're going to do. Or not do what we want them to do. Because that would be pretty expensive if we had to pull your permit. You wouldn't like that.
All right, so now I get to go through all of the conditions that we changed, just to let you know what we're talking about. Okay, number 1 stays as is. Number 2, 300 is changed to 250. Number 3 stays as is. Number 4 stays as is. Number 6 stays.
I'm sorry, pardon me 1 second. Can we just round table number 4? There was a note about that. That was the 100-foot setback.
I think with regards to number 4 and the 100-foot setback from property lines of non-participating properties, I think that does create kind of an issue for us, and losing megawatts, the 12 megawatts that we discussed. And we did agree to the 50-foot setback at the town level. So we just want to flag that for this committee.
I couldn't either.
Sorry, the adjustment of the setback from 50 feet to 100 feet from non-participating properties does create an issue for the project by losing 12 megawatts and redesigning the facility. So I just want to flag that for this group. The other thing I just wanted to make sure I heard this correctly, that there's a 2-year review on the conditional use permit. Did I hear that correctly?
no, there's not.
Okay. Someone else must have.
No, the only 6-month status reports is 6-month status reports.
Okay.
Until
thanks.
construction is complete.
During construction.
Okay, thank you. But yeah, so for number 4, we just want to push back a little bit on this one for the 100-foot increase, or the 50-foot increase from 50 feet to 100.
But with the 150 from a residence being fine.
Yeah.
Again, we don't want to do it from the residents. We want to do it from property lines. Got to treat all properties the same, whether there's a residence on them or not.
It's a matter of future sales and stuff. If somebody builds a house on, so we're watching out for some of that too.
So if somebody-
Over there, they might wanna build a house over there, when they watch the sun go down and they see all the glistening off of these things, they might want to move a house over to the western side of their property. And they might, you know, they might want to be, they don't want you to be, they want to be able to have 160 feet to your solar panels as opposed to 90, because they got a 10-foot setback from their property line that they have to stay away from your property on. We don't want to, and we've never done this. We've never discriminated against properties, whether they had houses on or not.
Correct.
In these types of projects. And we're not going to start now. At least
So I guess
that's my opinion.
My question is there committee consensus on the 100-foot number? All right, very good. Moving along to number 7, construction main laydown areas shall be located at least 500 feet from non-participating residents and in a manner to minimize impacts to non-participating residences. All right, moving on to number 13. The last sentence, the decommissioning cost estimate shall not include any estimates or offsets for the resale or salvage values. That is stricken. Decommissioning plan, and replaced with the sentence, decommissioning plan shall be updated every 5 years. The next change is number 17. The owner-operator shall install deer fencing around the solar equipment at a height of at least 7 feet, unless electrical codes mandate a different height. All right, and then down to 27. The new 27 says applicants shall provide 6-month status reports to the Land Management Committee during construction. Number 28 is the applicant shall keep and provide to the county or town a list of all chemicals used for maintenance. And number 29, the applicant shall provide Pierce County and the town of Gilman relevant site plans, including erosion control, construction timelines, and other relevant construction information at least 75 days prior to the start of construction to allow the local governments an opportunity to review and comment on construction information. The construction team should meet with county staff and town representatives at a mutually agreeable date, not less than 45 days prior to the start of construction.
Clarification on number 14, Andy?
Yes, sir. Number 14, my understanding was that we were simply leaving that as is.
And then negotiate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything further? Committee? You got anything else, Eric?
No.
I will entertain a motion if there is one.
I would move to find that the proposed large solar energy system is not contrary to the public interest, nor is it detrimental or injurious to public health, public safety, or the character of the area. While the proposed use will have impacts on the community, these impacts can be mitigated to the degree that they do not rise to the level of being contrary to the public interest or detrimental or injurious to public health and safety or the character of the area. I would further find that relevant studies have shown that in order for a utility-scale solar facilities to operate in harmony with other uses, adequate setbacks and buffers must be established and other conditions imposed. Guidance from the American Planning Association provides substantial evidence that buffers and vegetative screening are key elements to ensuring that utility-sized solar projects do not dominate the landscape and are a reasonable neighbor to rural living and agriculture. Given this, I would move to approve this conditional permit with conditions 1 through 29, ain't it?
Yep. It's been a motion by Mr. Holst. Is there a second? There's a second by Mr. Aubart. Is there any further input or discussion? Seeing there's none, all in favor of approving this CUP for a large solar energy system for Western Mustang, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And motion carries. Thank you.
You guys for your time and tonight and for the dialogue and for the community for coming out, and you know we're going to continue to be working out here, and so thank you for taking the time tonight. Appreciate it.
We anticipate that you'll be good neighbors to these people.
Yes,
Absolutely will be.
exactly. And travel training requests,
I have no travel training requests for your consideration tonight.
future agenda items.
We have 4 future agenda items: a modification for the Bella Vines Winery, a renewal of the Gillis Quarry, which is being run by Monarch Matthey, renewal of the Beisel Pit, which is Pierce County Highway, and then a potential modification for BS Construction, the pit by Mr. Silla, for Greg Beckel, agent.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn. I'll second.
And seconded, motion by Mr. Gilbertson, second by Dr. Sand. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.